But they would have, I really believe, done it even without that interception, but that just was the seal.
Sealed the
That
deal.
That just sealed the deal.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, it says it stopped streaming right now. Oh, let's stop. No? Okay. Oh, never mind. Okay, no, thanks. All right, so it's already going. Okay, good. All right, thank you. All right, bye.
We love our technology. Or
I guess
Are we good, Karen? Are we good?
We're good. Well, but
Okay.
I don't have the microphones for them yet. Hang on just a minute.
Okay. Can I help at all, or?
No, I don't think so. Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Just these slabs.
I'll say worst
It's
case,
already
Anna's
going.
got a
It's-
tripod in the car because
Oh,
photography
thank
and
you.
stuff, so use a phone.
Good evening. Another joyful day outside, right?
Hey, it feels like spring compared to
Anything
compared to what
we
felt
had.
a lot better today.
I know, but it's just the mud. It's,
Oh yeah.
I have
Wet,
two white
but-
dogs,
miserable. Oh my God.
and they love to be outside.
Yeah.
They get in the dog washing station.
Wasn't good when it was warm and
Very
muddy.
frequently.
It's cold and windy.
It's nice that
And then rain is just a
Pet
strange
Supplies
thing.
at Fenton has
We did not have a public hearing this one. That's all we
a
got.
dog wash station.
Well, this is the
They
second
remodeled it.
And I
Because we were
confused.
taking them to
I-
the brand company.
That's
It's
my
like,
friends, but I've got one right in my laundry room.
oh, perfect.
Oh, that's where you're right.
That's
Yeah,
household,
approved.
as I would say in the
That's
future.
like- that's what they- But I think the problem is, and I couldn't figure it out, is what we approved doesn't,
Oh my
their
God, my
pattern doesn't fit in it because
Casey,
of
they're
setbacks.
too short legs.
They're asking, I think, for different, for PUD or something. I don't understand it. So we're kind of going back to that, to give them like a special, to be able to use their plan.
He's just,
There was some place in there talking about
She-
that
she
there was
don't-
enough setback for some
little
things,
one, she
and they
don't
have
do
their
that.
set plans.
Now,
how
do they
wanna
do
it
well
from-
in the dog
I have
wash
used
or
it.
like-
I believe that's what the difference is, but
You read it?
I read some of the stuff, I haven't had to
they
reference.
like
They
their,
like it? Oh, good.
I didn't see anything about that. That's why I was just
Okay,
curious.
fabulous, thank
you.
That was in here somewhere?
Well,
they have.
with the big package, I did it online
They
first,
come
and
in
then
the back door and
so it's
I
looking
write
back.
it.
Because
All right,
all
sit in the back room, get back here.
all the middle was that master plan.
go
I
like
didn't
this.
make I went through a lot of it. So I think that's what the issue is here, is this is what they're asking for. So they're actually kind of, to me, variant from what would be allowed there under normal rules, I think. I'm not real clear on it either. and
That's what I
didn't
missed.
know.
I thought,
They're mind fighting.
Nice.
Well, I read a lot of stuff, and there's still a lot I didn't make it to, too, so. The problem is this part I read a week or more ago, and so I've forgotten a lot of this already.
Yeah. I need to get a better binder system to keep my notes on instead of just hang on to it. I write notes on stuff and then it's lost.
Yep. I don't know how we let Derek read.
All right, everyone, I have 6:30. We will call to order. If you could, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well,
All right, may we have roll call, please?
Steve Ruth is supposed to be on there.
She called you.
Here. You mean,
Kurt.
look, I thought
Here.
you said yes.
Mattson,
Here.
Mitchell,
Here?
Ruth, McCanny,
Here.
Fletcher. Here.
I was talking to George earlier. He did mention that Mr. Ruth had a conflict for tonight, so I'd entertain a motion to excuse him from tonight's meeting.
So moved. Excuse Mr. Ruth?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed? Thank you.
Who was the second? Second?
He just
That'd be
avoided
Glenn.
that.
Oh, you skipped it?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I thought I heard Ray and
Oh,
Mr.
okay,
Mitchell.
okay.
I thought I heard them both go at the same time.
Okay, I'll give you the second Ray.
My apologies.
The loudest gets first.
Whoever's keeping score.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, up next, we have our agenda approval. Anything anyone like to add or move around? Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I would move we accept the agenda as presented for
I can support.
January 23rd.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Mitchell, support by Ms. Mazick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
None opposed. All right, up next, we have our public comment. This is for items on the agenda only. We do have a public hearing for the special land use application for Trilogy Health. So this would be a public comment related to any of the other items. So the master plan review, the annual planning commission report, and the election of officers. The public will have an opportunity to speak on the special land use application during the public hearing. So public comment, we appreciate you taking the time to present your opinions. Everyone will have the opportunity to speak. In order for us to have an effective public hearing and public comment, please wait for the chairperson to acknowledge you before speaking. Please begin by stating your name and address at the podium. Give us your comments, opinion, and concerns. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to present during the public comment and then the public hearing. If you need additional time, we can motion to approve for up to an additional 3 minutes. Please do not talk or interrupt while another person is speaking up at the microphone. The commission does not respond directly to questions during public hearing or public comment. This is because the purpose of those opportunities to speak is to provide time for the public to speak and not for the commission to discuss or debate the item on hand. Please be respectful of the board, the applicant, and your neighbors. And again, thank you all for your attendance tonight. So I will open up public comment at 6:34 for items on the agenda not related to the special land use application. Yes, ma'am. Right up here.
I've never been to one of these before.
Well, welcome.
All right, thank you. My name is Sue Hinton. I have property at 11610 Dixie Highway. And I wanted to find out about what the master plan was going to be. I am hopeful. I understand that it is zoned residential currently now and also has the opportunity to go commercial. And my thoughts were I'd like it to be considered for light industrial, as there is no other commercial land out there. And I'm on one side of Belford Road. The other side is light industrial. There's a shop there. I think it's Shamrock or something, some kind of a factory. And so I'd like that to be considered, I guess. I don't know if you ever discuss this. 'Cause like I said, this is my first meeting. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comments this evening? Hearing none, seeing none. Up next is our our public hearing. So I will entertain a motion to open up public hearing for 636. This is related to the special land use application from Trilogy. North Hurstbourne Parkway, Suite 200, Louisville, Kentucky, for planned development that will consist of a convalescent home and independent living housing on part of parcels number 0125-101-013 and 0125-101-0114 and RM1 multifamily residential district. Do I have a motion and support to open the public hearing?
Move to open the public hearing.
All right, moved by Mr. Mitchell. Do you have a second?
I support that.
Mr. Curtin? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, public hearing is open. Any members of the audience to start us off for our public hearing? Yes, sir.
Martin Andreski, 2105 Middle Ridge Drive, Holly Township. While I do personally believe that the general concept presented by Trilogy may end up being more of a positive than a negative for the township when it's all said and done, although I do have some comments I'd like to make. While listening to questions previously related to the project from the commission on the subject, several times there seemed to be a lack of providing either a complete or given a partial answer to several points. Comments that I noted, and I went back through this past week that I wrote down in quotes were, "We've done this before, we're confident in our approach," and similar responses like that. And I guess my point would be is I hope the commission, doesn't begin to accept this as an acceptable response. Otherwise, I don't know why we go through it if we're going to ask questions and not get a response. Trilogy stated in their response to the Planning Commission that they cannot adhere to the township's ordinances and even seemingly appeared to threaten to walk away without concessions that could be made to get it done through the planned development. It also went on to mention, after a detailed discussion with McKenna, it was agreed that the planned development option would serve our mutual interest on the project. I, for one, would like to know who "our" is. It really never specifically said that. I read it over a few times. I would also like to ask if this is how situations are going to be handled universally for developments moving forward, especially in that property. Is it going to be treated the same whether it's a corporate entity that says they're not going to do it if they don't get to do what they want? And will that be universal to just a simple a landowner that wishes to do something that doesn't comply with regulations and ordinances, just to get a concept done? A simple question I would have is, if there's not enough property there to make the footprint work, why don't they acquire more property? Why doesn't the current owner, slice off something bigger? Should the developer maybe decide that they can't do it or don't wish to do it, hopefully their comments about not continuing on would have no impact on this commission. Ultimately, the community entrusts the Planning Commission, the Township Board, to make decisions and approval based on the best interest of the community and the established vision and ordinances accordingly. I also have a couple comments as I read through McKenna's response back to the Planning Commission. On page 3, item 2 said, however, the essential rural character of the area is not sufficiently protected by the proposed landscaping plan. It goes on to talk about the unnecessary removal of numerous tree stands and also addresses that it must be addressed or corrected during the site plan, and I appreciate that. On page 4, item 7, it says that the proposed concept generally conforms.
Martin, I'm sorry, may I interrupt? Would we be opposed to allowing Martin an additional 3 minutes? All in
Motion to
favor?
accept, yeah.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you,
you.
Martin. Yep.
And it says it generally conforms. And I guess my question would be, especially to the planners, shouldn't this be a direct yes, it conforms, or no, it does not? I guess my concept is if I hire someone in business to give me an opinion on something, I'm looking for something more than generally. Otherwise, I don't know why I'm going to the professional. On page 5, item 4D, it also says there is a greater opportunity for preservation of the tree stands. I hope that's noted and enforced. And then on page 6, item 4G, it says the proposed plan is not entirely consistent with the master plan for its natural features and conservation. Yet again, is it or is it not? I'm just looking, as a resident here, is it a direct thing? I'm looking for clear and concise, especially when the professionals are giving their input on it. While I can see the concept would likely be a good use for the land, it possibly be very beneficial to the community as it continues to age. I'd also like to say, let's not forget that it's also beneficial to Trilogy to build it out as well. So it's not just the township is getting a big favor here. It's a business. Lastly, as a reminder, our community does have a recently completed senior facility that currently is only at extremely minimal occupancy. Thank you. I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Anyone else who'd like to address? Thank you.
Anna Matson, 15091 Western Valley. So I looked into Trilogy a little bit, and they are owned by someone who are owned by someone who are owned by someone, and they're like 10 companies deep. And I found it very alarming that they are going to create an LLC that's going to own this project and be ran from this project forward. So it's essentially creating another shell company that if anything happens, I mean, they can go halfway into this project and walk away if they don't like something. And the only liability is on this shell company that they're going to create specifically for this Holly location. So Trilogy Health Services is not going to be on the line for anything. So if something really bad happens, we're going to have like the water problem that we had, you know. So that just doesn't sit well with me, that Trilogy's not on the line, that it's a shell company that's going to be running this, that, you know, this is just common practice for these companies that they do this, so they don't have the liability. So thank you.
Thank you.
Are we allowed to ask questions after we hear the presentation?
We will have an additional public comment, and we will open that up for any and all topics, sir.
I'm just not sure what the Trilogy piece is that they're objecting to, so.
Okay, well, and then during new business, there will be an opportunity where they'll come up and speak
Thank
to
you.
things. Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Anyone else for, oh, yes, ma'am.
And Angela's got to come up.
Sorry, the weather has me particularly.
Do not
confused.
apologize.
Yeah, you're okay.
Angela Corliss. 3086 Quick Road. And I just wanted to bring up, one of the things that we've talked about a lot has been the issue of density and the people that we're bringing in. With the Trilogy site, they are going to have the nursing home type with 91 beds. So figure 91 people. Not that any of them are probably going to be driving, but they're going to have family that visits up. Then you've got 28 duplexes. I'm assuming that for each duplex, we're looking at 2 families. Even if you do just 1 person per duplex, or 2 people per duplex, that's another 56 people. At full staff, they're anticipating they'll have 120 employees. Now we've just put in 147 residents, and even more when you add the employees. Basically, they're looking at 13.7 acres. That's going to make it an average of 10.73 people per acre. If you're worried about density, then this is a problem. That is all.
Thank you for your comment. Anyone else for the public hearing on the special land use application for comment? All right, hearing none, seeing none, would entertain a motion to close public hearing at 6:46.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing at 6:46.
Motion by Pam, do we have support?
Second.
Support by Mr. Mitchell. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, next we have the approval of our December 5th, 2023 meeting minutes. Any corrections, additions, anything that you all saw? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Move we approve the minutes of December 5th, 2023.
Motion by Mr. Mitchell. Do we have support?
I'll support.
Support by Pam. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. All right, we don't have any communications. On to old business, master plan review update.
I had a presentation, but we're having trouble getting connected to the TV, so just gonna ask if you're with me.
Aw. Shadow puppets?
I just had some maps I wanted to show you, but the new versions are in your packets. And the old versions are in the current master plan, so I just wanted to show some comparisons, but, so, I wanted to mention some notes from our last meeting. If you remember, we talked about transportation, and I said that I had a meeting with the Road Commission for Oakland County and had brought some questions from you all to them and have their responses to share with you. So when I asked them about, we've talked a lot about what needs to happen in terms of increased traffic or increased, different circumstances for them to increase the width of a road or increase the level of service for a road. Their response was basically that these changes occur as development is proposed and traffic studies are done to show that those things are warranted. And similarly for traffic lights and intersections, adding a light, changing the way that an intersection is structured, a traffic light warrant study would need to be conducted, and that would discern whether or not they would put in a new light. And there was another question about limestone. So we talked about gravel and the unpaved roads, and they basically said that limestone is more expensive, actually, and it's not as readily available, and it is harder to maintain. So it seems like their opinion is that gravel is the best material for now for the unpaved roads. And I have a link that I will share with you, which has their 2023 strategic planning. So everything that over the last year that they've been doing to plan for the next 5 years is publicly available, and has a little bit more detail about. We've got the presentation. Great. So if we could just go right into the maps, that'd be great, John.
I'm here to help.
Okay, thank you. So the first thing that you're looking at is what the commission completed between 2016 and 2022. So this is included in the link that I'll share with you, and it'll be available for the public as well, just to give you a sense of what has happened in the last about 5 years. So they did a reconstruction project along North Holly Road, and then simple resurfacing projects. And then if we could go to the next slide, this is all that they have planned for the next 5 years. So, the next about 4 years. They said through 2027. This is what they have planned for the township. And I know that it can be really frustrating because they're making decisions that you all have to deal with and live with every day. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means in terms of the master plan once I dive into that. And I will also say that this challenge in terms of, the road commission has control and decision making, and it's not unique to Holly, obviously. So townships across the state have the same kind of challenges, and it's not, something that there's really any major drastic thing that you all could do. It's just kind of the way that the government decision making is structured.
Doesn't that seem to be fairly light as far as for our township compared to other places in Oakland County?
if you go to the link, it shows the entire county, so what they've got planned and things like that. I didn't really take a look at other places, but that's a great question. It definitely, if you're just looking at this map without any other context, it looks light for sure. And again, this is through 2027, so now that we're in 2024, that's the next 3 years. And another thing that they mentioned is obviously funding. Roads have become exponentially more expensive over the last 5 years. And so another challenge is that with roads like Quick Road, if they're unpaved, they're not eligible for federal aid, and a lot of funding for roads comes from the federal government. So, there are some unique challenges and barriers, I would say, for a rural township than many other places like cities and villages.
Alexis, if I could, I would just say the other thing that this whole conversation suggests is a couple of things. Number one is finding partners. Right, so the county road commission, the road commission of Oakland County is not going to do it for you guys, right? So you need to find partners, which could include the township itself. It could include the village. It could include private developers. There's a lot of case studies out there where certain infrastructure has sort of been supported by private developers because it's just another person at the table, another partner at the table to help get the improvements that you guys want to see. So I would encourage you to look at creative ways to have more than one person or one entity or agency contributing to road projects, because that can then help you prioritize where you want the improvements to be done in the township. And then also obviously grant money, leveraging these projects with money that you guys can go out and get yourselves and bring to the table. The county, as you mentioned, has to represent all the communities in the county, so they're not going to prioritize Holly Township. That's up to you guys to prioritize yourselves. And in saying that, again, Alexis mentioned Quick Road. If you asked us what roads to focus on, your attention on in Holly Township, it wouldn't be Quick Road. Because I think people like driving in Holly down dirt roads, natural beauty roads. I think that's part of the character of up north in Oakland County. But they don't like getting stuck at lights and having difficulty accessing roads on North Holly or Grange Hall Road, right? So I think you need to prioritize where you invest your money to get the biggest bang for your buck and have it reflect the development and land use patterns that you've identified in the master plan. So that's another reason why when we talk to you about concentrated development in a close-in area or out by the interchange in the northeast part of the township, it's also so you don't have to spread your road money all throughout the entire township to provide access to every parcel in the township. So there's a logic and it's a logical and orderly way to invest in your infrastructure based on the way you guys envision the future development of the township. So that's probably way more than Alexis ever dreamed I would say.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, could you please tell us what that purple road is going north? What I can't read what road name that is. It goes all the way up to Grange Hall and then it takes a left
Oh, you're talking about that one?
Fish Lake or?
Fish Lake?
Looks like Fish Lake, right?
Yeah, Fish Lake would be the one.
It's the boundary, it's the municipal boundary. That's the edge of the township.
Oh, that's
Oh,
not a road?
okay, so-
I think that's Fish Lake.
That part of it is, I think part of it might be, but it's not a.
Because there's,
So where's the red?
There's
stuff you
Lake
guys
Road.
are working on?
Yeah,
Because I
it's county line.
apologize, I don't understand this map.
Yeah, so this is a map from the Road Commission for Oakland County. So all that it's highlighting is the light blue strips that you see along Belford Road. It's just a short strip right off of North Holly. And then down in the south, I think that's Maple.
Yep.
And these are just to show where they're doing simple resurfacing projects. So those are the only two things that they've got planned, and, yeah, yeah. And so, you know, bringing this back to the master plan discussion, we had the transportation discussion last month. What Nani and I added to the master plan to try to address this is we added a brief section in the transportation plan about complete streets. So if you remember, we talked about wanting to make streets safe for everyone, for joggers, for folks that want to be able to walk down to the store, for folks that have to drive farming equipment down the road, and drivers that have to try and go around them. So there is a brief description of what that means for Holly. And it also talks about setting a complete streets policy. So in terms of decision making, a policy is going to not have any, teeth in terms of saying we're going to pave this road, but it's more to guide the decision making. So in the master plan, we added that description of what that would mean, but we also have it as a goal under infrastructure to develop a complete streets policy. So, transportation wasn't a big focus for this master plan update. Obviously, it's a big concern for everyone, and we wanted to address it in some way, but with the scope of this update, we didn't have a ton of time to devote to it. So this is our effort to try to address it, but also say we need to continue addressing this. So I just wanted to touch on that because it was kind of a holdover from the last meeting. And then, John, if you could go to the next slide. I just want to talk about what we've done, what was in the scope for this project, and what we've done in terms of updating it. So tonight, what we're asking you is that you recommend to the Township Board that this draft be released for distribution. So this is part of the state law required 63-day public comment period. Now, this is exactly what I said. It's a draft. We're seeking feedback. We want to make sure that the public has an opportunity to comment on it. And the main updates that we've done are in these sections. So we've done a demographics update with the newest information from the census, things like population, housing. These are all things that we've brought to you, the new statistics over the last 5-6 months. And then existing land use. I'm going to come back to public input. So for the existing land use updates, we've updated the existing land use map, which really just shows a snapshot in time of how is land being used in Holly right now. In addition, we have conducted a housing analysis. So this is a new section for the master plan. It wasn't in the previous one. And again, we talked about this back in the November meeting. And it basically looked at what we're projecting in terms of growth for population compared to what the future land use map is going to allow in terms of increased housing units. So housing is I'm sure you've seen on the news, we have a housing crisis. There are many places where they don't have enough housing units. It's driving up the cost. That, isn't necessarily the case in Holly specifically. In our housing analysis, we actually found that the future land use map is very appropriately planning for increased housing units based on projected population growth. So that's great. Related to that, we updated the future land use map. So when we originally started off on the project, we had thought we're going to do this housing analysis, see based on those results, we will update the future land use map to say, well, actually, we need more housing units, or maybe we don't need as many. Because of our conclusions in the housing analysis that sort of stated we're very on track still with what we see in the future in terms of growth, we really didn't make many updates or any updates to the future land use map. So we've done a refresh to bring it into a bit more of a modern template, but the densities and things like that we've been talking about for each district have remained unchanged. So the biggest thing that we added is a recommended density for the rural town center. So that was something that we talked about again last time. All of the other future land use categories did not. They had recommended densities, whereas rural town center, for some reason, it just didn't have one. So we added that. We are recommending between 4 to 8 dwelling units per acre for that section. And that aligns with what is currently in the zoning ordinance and based on what's described in the future land use descriptions. And then the last thing, again, I'm going to go back to a public input summary, the implementation plan. So all of these things is the township saying, here's where we want our township to go in the future. The implementation plan is how are we going to make that happen. So with this, we wanted to update it to reflect all of the current planning and economic development initiatives. Based on our review, there was actually a lot of items in there that hadn't been accomplished yet since the last plan, which is totally normal. And, the last plan was passed in 2016, so you also had COVID in there. There was a lot of reasons that maybe certain things didn't get done, and these are long-range plans. It's very common for items to carry over from plan to plan. So again, we didn't really have any items to remove there because they were still aligned with all of the discussions that we've been having and things like that. So going back to the public input summary, we were tasked with conducting a public engagement process, which included the online survey, the online mapping tool that we have showed you, some interviews with the road commission, and hosting the website where folks could comment on things, and all of that input has helped us guide our discussions and guide this update process. And so that was a relatively new section for the plan as well. The previous plan didn't really talk about any of the public engagement that they conducted. If they had conducted a survey, it was kind of a missing limb from the plan, which public engagement, as we know, it's critical to planning. So that is also a new section. And now, one thing with the public engagement is we extended the survey, if you remember, by about a month and a half, which was great. We got a lot of additional responses, and that was the goal. But that also pushed back our timeline. So now we're at the phase where we're seeking to get this plan adopted. Tonight, if you should vote to send this draft to the township board, we are having our graphics department work on refreshing it. So, the covers and the headings and fonts and things like that are all still the same from the previous plan. Doing a graphics refresh is going to distinguish this plan from the old one, and also make some improvements in terms of organization and readability, just making it a bit easier to navigate. So our graphics department is working on that as we speak, and that would be ready for the next township board meeting, which is February 21st. So should you vote that you want to send the draft to them, it would be graphically refreshed.
I have a question, because
Sure.
I didn't make it all the way through, but there's some small
Absolutely.
details all the way through this that need to be updated or changed a little bit.
Sure.
How are we going to do that? Should we send you information about it?
Mhm.
Just example, it mentions CNO radio. railroad.
Yes.
That CNN now, and it has been for many years.
Sure.
One place that referred to the Mount Holly ski slope as being Holly Township, which is not. Later it was correct, but it did reference as if it was part of Holly Township. It's
Sure.
very close, but it's not in Holly Township. And I just have
see.
some questions about some of the maps, what they mean, and some of the things in here, so.
Yeah. Yeah, so again, if we vote to open it up for public comment, we are also seeking comments from you all. So obviously having only 5 days to review a 100+ page document it's a lot of content
I
to
thought we
get through.
might need to update it before we release the public, because we'd like to have the best form possible when we
Sure.
release it, is I guess my question is, how do we go about that, or?
Yeah. So, the changes that you're talking about would be really quick for us to make. And in terms of questions about maps and things, I think tonight is a great time to answer those questions. Things like changing railroad names, or if it's more of a,
There are a couple of
not a
grammatical
huge-
things that I thought that should be changed, but they're
Okay.
mostly are minor things. There's
Yeah, so stuff like that we could have changed before it goes to the township board. So, tonight, the public comment period would not start until the township board votes it to. So the way that the meetings have shaken out with the schedule, the next one isn't until February 21st, which gives us a month to make those changes and, get it ready before they vote, yes, let's distribute it, and then it goes and is posted on the website and things like that. But sending them to myself, I can make sure you have my email address, but also bringing them up tonight, that's why we're here. We want to discuss it. I'm here to get your feedback, and just to kind of close out my presentation, once the township board votes to distribute the plan, we would be able to make drafts available for folks to look at it. We could have a couple printed copies at township offices. We'll post it on the website. Folks can email comments. They can mail them, drop them off at township, and Karen can get them over to us. And after that 63-day review period concludes, it'll come back to the planning commission. So, comments sometimes can conflict with each other. We may have a few questions for you after that. But after that concludes is when we'd come back and ask that you adopt the plan, and that would be the next and final step in the process. So,
Also, Alexis, real quick, sorry.
Yeah.
The plan also gets distributed to surrounding communities.
Yes.
And Oakland County, and
Yep.
also the railroads.
Yep.
So, all the utility people and those agencies will have opportunity to provide feedback. Agencies like the railroads typically don't, but Oakland County has a very thorough review process, so they will most definitely come back with comments on the plan, all intended to be helpful. None of which you're required to take you're not required to take their suggestions, but they're definitely worth considering. So again, as far as the editorial comments and things like that, we love to have all the extra eyes on the plan, because we do want the best plan to go out and be distributed. So if anyone has editorial comments, that kind of thing, make sure to get them to Alexis. In terms of questions about policy and things like that you have questions about or would like to discuss, now's the time for that.
And John, if you could go to the next slide. The two main map updates that we did were the existing land use, which is this one. So on the left was the previous, and on the right is the new one. So what we did is just look at aerial imagery and try to discern. Mostly the changes that we've made were from a vacant parcel to, okay, now there's a house on it, or now there's a business. But a lot of the land use from, 5 years ago hasn't changed. There's not going to be a totally drastic change that you're going to visually see on this. But this was one of the map updates that we did. And then if you could go to the next slide. This is the future land use. So one thing that we did was, on the left is the previous one, and there are these green, I don't know how you would call them, squigglies.
The
That's
darker green clouds, it looks like.
yes, clouds, exactly. Those are they're symbolizing tree cover. But then it's kind of difficult to see what's underneath, right? So on the right side, you'll see that removed. And again, we didn't see through the housing analysis a ton of, or any information that would warrant changes here. So this has largely remained unchanged. And John, if you could go to the next slide, I just want to make sure there's not one I'm missing. So yeah. Next steps, should you vote to send this to the township board, this would be the process, and I would love to take any questions that you have.
Perfect.
So, I don't want to spend all night here, but map number 1 has a natural feature inventory. It has priority 1, priority 3, and priority 2, but it doesn't explain what that priority means. I didn't see it in the reading part. It just has different colors in the map. So I'm confused why we have high priority in some of them, and it doesn't say what makes that a priority over the other things. So I thought that should be part of the map detail, or the detail of the map.
What page is that?
Well, it's map number 1. It's after page 23, I think.
Okay.
So it's 24. The maps don't have numbers on
Yeah.
it, so it makes it hard to find. And I flipped it back and forth, so I don't know if it's 24 or 25, but it's somewhere there.
I just noticed that too.
Yeah, so that is a great point. That is a map that we didn't change, but I think that makes sense to add a description.
I didn't see the red part,
Absolutely.
but I might have missed it, because there's a lot of wording in here, but it just seems like you should explain what that's really telling us.
Sure.
Why is it important, why is the other one's not as important, I guess would be the question. And on the flip side of that, there's woodlands and tree rows. What does tree rows mean? The legend at the bottom has water bodies, that makes sense, but the other just says tree rows with the light green color. Is it just trees or woodlands? Tree rows just seem like an odd thing to...
Exactly, woodlands, yeah.
Okay.
It's just another way to say, sure.
We will put definitions for those in the plan, so we know what we're talking about. The tree rows, I think, are, sort of, a woodland is a larger contiguous, growth area of trees, whereas a tree row is more of a distinctive physical feature, that lines fields, farm fields. A lot of times you go in
Because the map just looks like where you have it says tree rows that just look like where there's woodlands. It doesn't
so they may
separate
or may
them.
not be natural or old growth trees. They may have been planted, for a purpose. And, some of them remain, some of them have been removed, obviously. So we'll define that in there.
Map number 7, if you want me to continue, has the roadways under functional classifications, and I just have a hard time that some of them are considered major collectors, and maybe and I know it has definitions for these in here, but minor arterials are considered Grange Hall Road and North Holly Road. Well, I don't consider those to be minor. Maybe I just didn't get the definition right there, but those are major contributors to I-75 and US 23 the way they go. So it looked like it devalued their importance in this area. And then something like Fish Lake Road, I don't know why the paved part of Fish Lake Road wouldn't be a collector. The part of it, the south, is considered a collector, and this is map number 7 if you're looking for it. So it just didn't seem quite right how some, especially Grange Hall Road, North Holly Road, just seemed like they were a more major road than they were given in this map.
Yeah, so with those, that's based on a national system from the Federal Highway Administration of classifying roads. So, the reason that it may seem like, well, for Holly, this is a major road, this is a major thoroughfare, they are comparing and categorizing it compared to roads across the country. So that may be why it doesn't feel like a good match. And
I'm thinking we should be talking about that, though, because it is, those roads have gotten substantially more traffic in the last 10, 15 years.
Considering from when it was originally done,
It might be something the township needs to actually push for an update on or something.
Yep, and as Alexis pointed out, the feds may not update it.
Yep.
But if it's a road of local importance, then it needs to be shown that way in the plan and targeted for improvements like we were talking about earlier.
And our supervisor, I think, finally got North Holly Road fixed because it was the Genesis, was the I-75, was the National Cemetery. So it's become much more prominent in the last 10, 20 years than it was before that, obviously. And Grange Hall Road is just a major thing between I-75 and Fenton and US 23. It's just a major route that's taken.
Yes,
so.
it is.
You see a little traffic there, huh?
Yeah. Just a smudge more.
Yeah, so like Judd said, we can make it clear roads of local importance is kind of the phrase that we use in planning because, again, when you have, you know, these higher levels of government that are trying to define things and they've never even been to Holly, it's good to make that distinction. Well, actually, even though the feds classify it as this is a major thoroughfare for us. So
And that was earlier on, too. It talks about the exits in Holly, and of course, Dixie Highway, where exits is just outside of Holly, but doesn't even mention it. It mentions East Holly Road, also just outside of Holly, being I-75, but Dixie Highway does have an exit within probably half mile of Holly Township, and so it's still a major thing to me, is that because it does, we do have several intersections with I-75, although only one of them is technically in Holly, I guess, Holly Township.
Sure. And one of the reasons that it may feel like there have been drastic changes since is because, again, these are sections that we only lightly reviewed and weren't, you know, the major focus for the update, but these are definitely things that we can add, so.
And you need to, and I'd have to go back and look where, but some of the places that hardly mentions the National Cemetery, and I think it's just because when you updated, it was just new or just barely new when I think this was last done. So I think it's a much more major thing that's given credit in here for. If you go to table 32 on page 69, I'm puzzled at the very bottom on the total, somehow we lost 168 acres in the township. And I don't know how you just lose land, because it divides up in the different type of usages.
Yes, so for this one,
The very bottom right, when you get down there, it's minus 168, and that's actually number of acres changes from the beginning. So the left-hand column is in 1990, and you go across the other years, and somehow we lost 168 acres. And
yeah, so, you know, one thing that, because I remember updating this table, is with the extractive, you can see it's not available for until 2007. So I believe there originally was on this page a note about issues in terms of data collection or tracking. Like there
was a change in how they did some of it. I know it said there how Oakland County looked at some of the things.
Right. So, you know, that could attribute to it, but I see what you're saying, how that can be confusing.
And
so
further up too, I was just surprised manufactured housing, what was it? We actually lost acres for manufactured housing, and I didn't know anything had been taken out as far as manufactured housing. It's like the third or fourth one down. I just don't know how we would lost 134 acres of manufactured housing land. There might be a reason for that. It doesn't seem to like there be. And then under agricultural, if you follow across, it just looks like all of a sudden we dipped and then went back up between 2000 and 2015. And again, there might be explanation, but it just looked very strange that 1 year was substantially less than the others before and after it.
Sure. You know, all of the years before 2023, that was data that was in the previous plan. So I absolutely understand like why you're having these questions.
And I forgot, one of the major things I thought you should actually define some of the major events, the pandemic and the big downturn, the recession, to define why some of these things happen in certain years. And you do discuss it later on, but I think it needs to be a major part of why some of these things happen in this area. And I guess not part of anything in particular, but it just seems like when we're talking about building out and some of that stuff, I'm not sure we're looking at some of the information to me, isn't accurate because we have a substantial amount of state land in Holly Township. We have Hollyshire Farms that probably will never come off of what it is now. We have the National Cemetery. These are all lands that are just, to me, taking out of development. And plus the fact one of the early maps was about what was suitable for septic tanks. And when you look at that, there's not much of Holly Township that's suitable for septic. Doesn't mean you can't put it in, it just means it's very expensive, and it means you usually have to have more land to be able to do that. So when you put those all together, I'm not sure we have as many buildable acres as you are projecting there, because you're doing on national averages, not taking into consideration some of the unique things in Holly Township.
Sure.
Definitely, good point.
I think that's most of my, I have a few small things, but that's mainly wording or something like that. Then. I didn't want to take up all the meeting, but I did spend quite a little time looking through this, and
Yeah.
so, yeah.
I really appreciate your comments because, there's a lot of things when you're looking at the nitty-gritty details and not reading it from front to back that you kind of miss, and also the
When you scan it,
local
you don't notice
context.
those things. Let's put it that way, yeah.
Great stuff, Glenn, thank you.
I guess one other comment is the survey that we did. I want to remember every time we look at a survey and we say what it says, remember we opened it back up, who probably almost all the people that commented that extra time was ones that it was dealing with the Silverman project. So that tipped some of the answers, I think, or the explanations more towards problems there or issues there than just general issues of the township. Years ago, when I first became in the planning commission, we ended up with a tree ordinance, and to me it was one specific thing that happened before I was on that triggered them doing a tree ordinance, which I still think is unnecessary and burdensome, which is part of what Trilogy was going to talk about before too long. But it was because there was one problem there, and so the people that were most excited about that problem came and made themselves known, but it wasn't necessarily a uniform thing through the whole township. It was one small group of people, but very vocal group is what I understood. So
Sure.
we have to remember when we look at those surveys, the people that fill them out, and a lot of times it's because they have a problem with something. It's not, and I know that there's, doesn't mean they don't have valid points. It just means sometimes that skewers the needle towards their particular problems or what's happening at that particular time, not over the whole general time period.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'd like to address the board on an issue. If we can go to the map 10, the future land use, I really have a problem with what we're designating as urban service receiving district. It would be the lower district next to the village. So if I look at our master plan and I read exactly the definition of what they consider a sending zone and a receiving zone, and I just want to read that one part if I could so the audience understands a little bit here. The sending zones can be environmentally sensitive properties, open space, agricultural land, wildlife habitat, historical landmarks, or any other places that are important to the community. So they could send some of their development rights, it would be their transfer rights, which would be the receiving zones. The receiving zones are areas that are appropriate for increase in density and development. These receiving areas can accommodate the demand for schools, shopping, transportation, and other common urban services. Now, if I look at this map in that lower section where you're talking about making that, if I could, it would be this section right down there, a receiving zone. Where else? What else would you put in there to increase it or to be a receiving zone? We've had these issues before when the different developments, Riverside's come before us, and that's some of the biggest issues in that area is infrastructure, transportation, how to accommodate transportation between communities. In my opinion, I don't even see how that could be still considered to stay in there as a receiving zone unless I'm absolutely not looking at this correctly. We do have in the township, if you look at viable areas where there really are receiving zones, it is up in the section up there in your North Holly area, and even maybe somewhere down the road, those should be reconsidered. But I just don't see, with everything else I've seen and all the discussions that we've had before us in the Planning Commission, that stayed in as a receiving zone. What else, how much further would you develop that corner, that whole section? And I've gone out and I've driven up and down and drove around and I'm thinking, where else are you going to expand it? I mean, I know it's been on the map for a while, but it does not make sense to me.
Are you really saying it's built out already, so there's not much left? The Sylvan
Yes.
property is the bigger part of this.
Because
but-
they're designating that as a receiving
yeah.
district.
Yeah, because the southern part of it, I don't think there's that much
I
space
understand the
left.
concept
Yeah.
between the sending and the zoning and your transfer rights. I understand that, but please tell me to leave that as a receiving zone. Where else are you going to build out in that area? Now, I understand, I mean, there, you do have a section, we do have, on the map now, you have your overlay section, but we've listened to the fire department, we've listened to residents come in about that whole section. Unless it gets completely demolished areas, or you expand further and go further down Fish Lake Road, I would really like that explained before I can say I think that should stay
Well,
on the
and
map.
then something to add, if I could, real quick. If it could be explained, when I'm looking at pages like 89 through 91, the transfer development ratio for the properties, I don't know if that means the transfer of the sending rights to the receiving
saw
zone,
that.
excuse me, show that the properties can be even more dense. So you're looking at, neighborhood residential densities, if I'm understanding it correctly, transfer development, 3 units per acre. And the rural town center could be 12 units per acre. I mean, that's like,
I saw that
we were
too.
discussing having issue with even 4 units per acre possibly in rural town center. And it could be 4-to-1 to 8-to-1 for a regular development, which 8-to-1 would be a 50, just under a 5,500 square foot lot. Which I'll speak for myself, but as a board, I thought we were fundamentally against some things that tight. So if you could speak to if I have that understanding correct, and I wholeheartedly agree. We've talked
thank you.
fundamentally about density, so.
Sure. So the first thing I want to talk about is the concept of trying to protect those areas in the township that are of most value to the township with respect to its natural features and their open spaces, okay? So the area that you pointed to and said, why can't we make the open spaces in the township the receiving zones?
No.
Like in the upper northwest part, why don't we make that the receiving zone?
I think she's saying keep it a sending zone.
We do have, if you look at your receiving zone trip, those 3 receiving zones.
There's 2 receiving zones.
So
There's-
to me, if you're going to look at where you're going to concentrate, look at your ordinances and look at your master plan changes.
Yep.
You've got those areas there, not this here.
Right.
I understand, and I think the board does, and I think the audience does understand what we want, if we want to keep open space, protect environment, protect our land agricultural area, yes. So you're talking about taking those areas, those are your sending. This is my area, and here I'm saying, how can we say that as a receiving zone?
Right. So this, like I was talking earlier, we also have to think about the cost, the future cost of supporting where people live in the township, right? There's going to be cost where people live in terms of providing services, right? If the people who move to the township in the future spread out all over the entire township, it's going to be much less cost-effective to provide them all the services that they want. Police, fire, not to mention the capital improvements, the water, the sewer, the roads. So the concept is to try to keep that growth in these areas down by the village where you already have a concentration of development, and not necessarily create another village someplace else of concentrated development where you have the same efficiencies of providing those services. keep it all right in around this area here. So that is the rationale for why we wanted to have a receiving zone here. And the other thing I wanted to point out about it is that the base density that you get in the receiving zone is low. So by right, we've lowered the density that you can get in the receiving zone. So if you just want to go into a subdivision tomorrow in the receiving zone, just a conventional subdivision, the density is going to be low. Alexis, what's the density? If you just do a by right development. It's in the master plan, right on the land use, the first column for neighborhood development.
For neighborhood development,
Yep.
it's 1 dwelling unit per acre.
One dwelling unit per acre. One dwelling unit per acre. That is not sustainable development from a developer standpoint. No one's going to do 1 acre development where they have to provide any kind of utilities. It's not going to happen. It's not sustainable from the township standpoint either, because it consumes way too much land. If everyone who moves into the township for the foreseeable future gobbles up 1 acre of land, the open space is going to disappear before you know it. It's going to be gone. No more open space in Holly Township. No more up north in Oakland County if we have 1 acre minimum lot sizes. Okay?
We do not, throughout the township, have just 1 acre lots.
That's right. But what we're saying here is that if they preserve the land and lower the density and take the pressure off of developing out here, they can develop at a higher density in this area. And it's not smaller lots. We're not talking about smaller lots. We're talking about different styles of buildings. We're talking about townhouses. We're talking about loft units. We're talking about the kind of images that we showed, and people said, yeah, I could see that here in Holly. You know, we're not talking about 8-story high-rises. We're talking about things that would fit in and blend in with the character. And that would take the pressure off of developing out in these areas here.
And I do agree with that. I understand taking the pressure off. But I look at that, and I just look at that section and say, in my mind, where else? To me, it looks like it's already pretty well built out.
It's really not. There's nothing really up in this area here. There's a lot of empty, undeveloped lots. And that's part of the challenge. It's much easier for a developer to come out and say, wow, here's a nice chunk of land. I'm going to develop the heck out of that sucker. That's a no-brainer for a developer.
But they still would have to develop it under the residential, what is it, the residential plan development, because that section out there is all, it's well and septic. And they can, you know, they could go in, a developer could go in and they have to follow, they have to follow the guidelines per acre with your minimum lot acreage. If it's 2.5 acres or 3, they can put in a.
Yeah, on here it says 10 to 40 acre lots.
By right. But we also lowered the density up here. We lowered the density up here too. No one's going to develop, no one is going to develop something at 10 acre minimum lot sizes. No developer is going to come in and say, I want to do a development at 10 acre with 10 acre lots. It ain't going to happen. So what we're trying to do is create an incentive for the people and in value, the value of the property here, which really is not viable for development, to sell the development rights down here so you get the combined density of both of these clustered in an area right here in a character, in a style that's acceptable to you guys. Right? So we're not talking about necessarily small lots. That's not what we're talking about. We want to also have usable open spaces in these areas in terms of central, neighborhood parks and things like that. But the types of development, they don't have to be small lots. So when you look at the densities that are here, they may be different types of buildings spread out from each other with more open space.
But I mean, the reality, if it does receive those rights from that other area, like you're saying, is the whole point and benefit, it's going to be either 3 dwellings per acre, or it could be up to 12 dwellings per acre. That's right here in the plan.
Yeah. It could be up to 12 acres, or 12 units per acre. But again, we're not talking about a single lot that's 1/12 of an acre that you put a house on. We're talking about maybe having
some residential units over a commercial building. That's, you can't do that at 3 units per acre. That doesn't even exist. You'd have to have so much open space that you'd have this building sitting in the middle of a park.
Yeah, I understand, I get that, I understand what you're saying. I mean, but also in our findings and all that, it was like 90% of people want single-family homes.
Yeah.
And I understand we want a variety of housing, but 90% of it needs to be single-family homes, and we're also trying to balance the preservation. I mean, open space preservation, conservation, and activities, community activities, those were the biggest things highlighted in the survey, the feedback, what we get in these meetings. I get a variety of housing, but I just challenge that. I challenge that dense. I just, that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm missing this, but I thought part of Pam's thing was, we understand the general concept of sending zone and receiving zone, but when you come down the receiving zone, almost all the open space there is Silverman properties. If they build it up now based on the next year or two, how does that help anything? Because they've already used up the land. They're not going to go back and take down a house and put, a tri-level house in or something to increase the density. So once Silverman develops that, isn't the potential loss for it becoming a receiving zone? And I think Pam was kind of saying most of that area was pretty well developed except for the Silverman property.
And
it doesn't mean you
still,
couldn't
I mean,
take
you
down a
could-
building and replace it with something, but it's just isn't
Right.
going to be very popular.
And that's part of, that's the hard part about sustainability, right? Just because you have one house on a 5-acre piece of property in this area where you have water and sewer available, right? That's when you got to do a gut check and say, it really does make more sense to put 20, 25 units on that 5 acres where it can get water and sewer, and they can walk to the commercial, they can easily get to the services, than it does to put, 25 units up here on 25, 50, 75 acres.
But my point
75
is,
acres.
Silverman is supposed to wait until somebody wants to develop more before he can get a right to put more houses or more density there.
No, I don't,
Once
no.
he's already built, it's going to use that.
I don't think he's
somewhere.
asking for the highest density here, so he wouldn't have to,
Asking for much higher density than we.
Yeah.
not the highest density
Not the
that's
highest
allowed in the
possible, I'm
plant,
sure,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
But if it's in there.
Plus, we also offered, we also proposed in the plan that it doesn't have to come from transfer development rights. It could come from clustering. There's other ways, to serve multiple objectives of the township, preserving open space through clustering. So, I mean, there's other things. Or, like I said earlier, making improvements to the infrastructure, the trailway system, other things that you guys are trying to do that you don't have the resources to do yourself. They're partners here. They could be partners, and we see that not just with Silverman. I know that's a concentration here, and it's right in front of us. I get it. But there's other things that we're talking about. We're talking about the development up here in the northeast part of the township. We've seen industrial development already coming there, so there's other opportunities in the township that fit into this vision and this plan.
Your explanation and what you, thank you, was very thorough.
So, I mean, you get excited. I apologize.
No, but looking at it as a planning commission member, when I look at that area there, and I think right away, all right, how much more can you build it out? I mean, we're already so stressed in that area on infrastructure and transportation and just the explanation. So when you look at that, so maybe the explanation in the page here needs to be changed. It's a lot. It's a lot for us to look at when we look at what is our job here to preserve the environment, to allow residents to be able to move through the township easily and still have the amenities and what they need. So For me, that was an issue. It still is an issue, so I guess we just have to look at it to be very careful with how we review sightlines.
Okay. Well, that's great discussion. Thank you. On page 90 and 89, these little maps, I think these are really cool. Is there a way that we can like get a bigger hunk of that to get a better feel of how this is like a tool as far as like how we visualize this, either on the side or a sheet that we can use or added to the, because you get the little thumbnail and you can kind of, I mean, if you hold it real close, you can go, oh yeah, I feel that. But it would be, if we could expand that to make it with a few more roads, that'd be great, because I think there's a concept trying to be communicated, and it just needs to be a little bit bigger. Or if we could have a big wall-sized one behind us or something.
Yeah.
But I think that's a great addition to this plan as I was reading through.
I think that makes sense, and I will definitely get with the graphics department and make sure that these are maybe a bit more legible, larger, maybe give them each their own page, so you, like you said.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
And
This needs more of a map.
Sure, and the master plan is your tool, right? Like, you guys you should be referencing this all the time and having, you know, maybe we could do like one each page. Our graphics department is really great, and
Yeah.
I'll
Well, I hope they
sure
could
she
just
gets
like
that
cut and
comment.
paste some more roads in there instead of draw. Hopefully nobody's drawing this with a piece of paper, but
We want
It
paved
looks
roads
great.
in there, and just gravel roads either.
I just have one more quick thing. These pages at the last, if you had a chance to take a look at them, because they really do kind of outline for us, short-term, long-term, what we should look at. Because when you go through our master plan and you pull out the different zoning sections or the section with goals, it makes us be aware that, yes, we are probably going to have to go through and tune up the ordinances or go through just to make sure some follow through. But then I kind of looked a little bit through some of this. It's a lot of the things we talked about. There was a very good section. Good section.
Thank you.
Page 101, development guidelines, there are some images of different style properties. I didn't really feel the top right or the bottom left really spoke to like the rural feeling of kind of the area, or what, I'm not sure what those images are supposed to be representative of as far as our master plan.
Yeah, so I definitely see where what you're getting at, and I wish that I had these up on the screen for you guys, but I think what those are getting at is it's talking about sustainability. So in the previous section, it talks about buildings should follow LEED green building design. That's just saying it's very environmentally friendly.
Okay.
I think that's kind of what these ones are getting at, but I see what you mean in terms of architectural, like facades. It doesn't really fit with what the rest of the plan is saying. So these ones.
So, yep, so this was originally intended to show what kind of development could go up on North Holly Road. And that was, in this whole area might go away. Alexis said that there weren't any changes on the future land use plan. I know at one point in time, we talked about getting rid of that area on North Holly Road. I don't know if that's something that we want to talk about, but when we put that up there, we were thinking we needed something that could build off of what Grand Blanc was doing with their high-tech village that they're trying to create here.
Yeah.
So we were trying to blend high-tech and attract high-tech users into a rural area. So we were trying to channel Domino's Farms kind of thing and double down on the sustainability aspect and things like that. So that's why it's a little more of an eclectic mix of modern architecture and a natural setting.
Yeah, I think if it's specifically for that
Yep.
top black box that you're,
Yep.
just so the public can understand if it fits the aesthetic of the neighboring Grand Blanc, I think that makes sense.
Strictly
So
for that
cool.
area.
Page 103 talks about the receiving zone in the top right. I know, I don't remember, it was very quick. I believe it was maybe not even the last time we had the last meeting, but the one previous. You had asked about this area. I don't remember the specific crossroads, but there was a portion that was like commercial industrial. You were getting some light feedback from us on what we thought. It looks like on page 102, it's kind of, it does show like mostly like it has like a vet, a gas station, but I think at least, we had quickly touched on it being mainly like a commercial industrial area, but I don't know if you have any more details or things you can touch on what the goal is for that particular receiving zone.
Yes. So I believe that was in November. Nani had included it in the housing section of our presentation. So from what I remember, it was if you see on the map, the blue section. So that is institutional and local recreation. And then the yellow just north of that, we have it as neighborhood residential. I think going up, leading through the north, Nani was just trying to get a sense of, does this make sense for this area? We didn't end up making any changes. Like, after that conversation, it didn't seem like the board felt very strongly one way or the other. But, the idea behind that is because there's recreational opportunities, there's the state lands to the south, and as an area that could be fit for more development, the idea is it could be a area for growth and the descriptions for this district, like, we didn't really change at all. And again, it talks about enhancing linkages between the development of the surrounding communities. So Grand Blanc and kind of playing off of that, building off of the access to 75. So does that help? Did you?
Yeah, I wanted to just get more description as to what was kind of talked about or what was being sought after in that area. It does say for the implementation on page 106, create and enforce new zoning classification for low-density residential and rural estate. So if I go back to page 47, does that mean that would be a, like, rural estate? If it's rural estate or low density, what's the dwellings per acre count on that?
So you're talking about page 106, that's right.
106, that should go for the development over at the Great Lakes community.
Yep, so that's within the Great Lakes.
Oh, I thought it was,
No, that's the Great Lakes community.
oh, I'm
so
looking
that
at the wrong
wasn't
thing.
106, yeah.
Okay, got it. Excuse me.
It's a lot of,
So, well, even
Sub-plans
that
in
says, so then my question, it says the classification for rural town, research office and commercial center. So you're talking having an additional rural town center, 4 to 8 dwellings per acre, or up to 12 for a receiving zone.
which pages are you looking at? You
For 103.
Yeah, so I think I know what he's getting at. Let me take track of the map here.
Sure.
So up in the northeast, this blue area is a gravel extraction area, right? So I think the concept there was maybe in the future that might build off of what the county did with the off-road vehicle park, you know, some kind of recreational facility, something like that. Maybe build off what's going on at Holly, Mount Holly, in terms of creating some outdoor recreational concentration. So that was the concept behind here. And then the areas up around along Dixie Highway is, we did have an area for office research, as well as general commercial. That was the idea of, again, building off of what's going on in Grand Blanc, maybe get some hotels up there. If we were gonna get some big box development, you know, Myers or whatever as an example, or that would be the area where we would expect it to come to serve Holly Township.
And do you know what color on that you're representing for that?
The purple is the commercial, the general commercial.
Okay.
And the sort of pinkish beige is the research office. And then when it comes to the rural town center, there's a chance that there's no residential also. You know, it is intended to be a mixed use. It's intended to allow a mix of uses. It doesn't require a mix of uses. You don't have to put residential in the town center area. It allows for residential. So that could be some kind of, you know, I'm going to use something that I hate in this planner jargon, but it could be like a lifestyle center. So if you've been to the Rochester, the village of Rochester, you've seen that where you've got the street that goes between the shops, that kind of thing. That's kind of what we were envisioning at that intersection, at that small intersection. So, you know, again, if you look at the two areas that we have in the township, we've got this little area right here where we allow mixed use. We don't require it, we allow it. And right here, we allow mixed use, we don't require it. So, I mean, those are the two areas where you could get up to the densities that we're talking about, but they're so small and
That's very
relatively
logical there,
speaking.
though, with connection to Grand Blanc and the
Mhm.
expressway. And I think at some point it was even just some discussion about possibly even a substation for the fire department up there, so. Could be.
So did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Yes, thank you.
I was going to comment, you're on page 106, it's one of the things that says designated natural beauty roads. Now, Kurtz Road was many years ago, and maybe I'm misinterpreting it, but it allowed the road commission could trim trees on it, they couldn't widen the road. And even though it sounds wonderful and I like trees and everything, safety is almost more important, and I consider Kurtz Road. Now, it's not going to be highly dense, that area, because Hollyshire Farm surrounds most of that. But if you get more and more cars going down that road, that could be extremely dangerous, and if you can't improve the road and make it safer, it's a big issue. So I do think you want to be really careful of designating natural beauty roads in some of the cases.
Sure.
Even though the concept sounds good, in practice, it could be a real problem in the future.
Any other discussion amongst the council?
I'm
Commission,
good.
excuse me. Yeah, I mean, my only hang-up is how dense especially the receiving zones, really. So, I mean, we could have it drafted and have it checked out by the public. I would personally like for that portion of it to be changed before I would,
I would think we should go one more meeting before we present that. I think we need to get some updates in there, and I could be wrong, but I don't want to prolong it any longer. We have to, but
We'll obviously, we'll take your lead and we'll do what you want. And we want you to own this plan. This is your community, it's your plan. So we're just trying to make sure that you have all the information available to you, all the options that are available to you from a planning and zoning standpoint to achieve what you've talked to us about for all these years up north in Oakland County, and how can we preserve that and maintain that. So we'll continue to try to, you know, explain the rationale and the thought, and at the end of the day, if we don't get it done, we don't get it done.
all right, thank you. I appreciate you both.
Thank you.
Since no action, we'll move on to new business, special land use application from Trilogy Health Services, 303 North Hurstbourne Parkway, Suite 200, Louisville, Kentucky, for a planned development that will consist of a convalescent home and independent living housing on parcels number 101-013 and 0125-101-014 in RM1 Multiple Family Residential District.
Yes, it's me again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Should have stayed up here. So, I'm just going to give a brief overview. I'm sure you've all had a chance to look at our review letter, and this is obviously a proposed site that we've talked about a couple of times now. So, to just kind of clarify why we're back here and what the process is that we're talking about. The applicant has submitted an additional special land use application for this site after they've already received the special land use application to operate a convalescent home at this site. So this is going to be a second special land use permit that they are seeking, and what they're seeking is called the planned development option. So because this property is situated in the Grange Hall Fish Lake Road Overlay District, it allows applicants to seek a planned development option through the special land use procedure. I know this is a lot of jargon and it's like a little bit confusing. They're pursuing this route because they had a couple of setback issues. So by pursuing the planned development option, they're asking for a little bit of lenience on a couple of the setbacks, which we detailed in our letter. And they're also proposing a public benefit, which is required through the planned development option, which would be a sidewalk along Fish Lake Road to connect to future residential developments, as well as a connection through the east of the site, through the rear of the site, to the future planned residential developments. So, to give a little bit more context about this planned development option, it's basically a tool within the zoning ordinance that recognizes that certain proposed projects are going to deviate from underlying zoning, and it is intended to allow various types of land uses in a manner that will encourage use of the land in accordance with its character and adaptability, conserve natural resources and energy, encourage innovation in land use planning, provide enhanced housing, employment, shopping, traffic circulation, and recreational opportunities for the people of the township, and bring a greater compatibility of design and use. So, approval of a planned development option requires a special land use approval from the Planning Commission. So that's why in the review letter we have both the special land use standards as well as the planned development option standards. And the primary change that approving this special land use permit is allowing is, again, some of those setback changes. Those are outlined in the table on page 4. So, part of what brought this all to be was the discussion, if you remember, in previous meetings about the north end of the site and concerns from the fire marshal about access, and the applicant has removed parking at the request of the fire marshal to make sure that there's a designated fire lane. And they've, by shifting things, started to encroach along the northwest corner into the setbacks. So, by pursuing this planned development option, it's created an avenue for the community to gain the public benefit of the proposed sidewalk, which originally the applicant has proposed a 5-foot wide sidewalk. We are recommending that the Planning Commission require that it be 8 feet wide. So along Fish Lake Road is where in the master plan it talks about a planned trail and pathway plan. This would, by widening it, it's going to make it more comfortable for folks and make it more of a pathway and not just a sidewalk. And that's something that the Planning Commission has within their power to ask of the applicant through this process. Based on our findings, we do recommend that the planning commission approve this special land use request. There are still a number of items that, a couple of which were brought up during public comment, that will be needed to have details provided by the applicant during site plan review. So things like landscaping, the tree preservation and tree replacement. So at this stage, it's what we just call a concept plan. That's why we didn't address all of those things in our review letter. But based on the standards of both the special land use and plan development option in the zoning ordinance, we find that the applicant complies. And we also, in our recommendation, have several conditions that we recommend that you place upon this approval. So that is the 6 items in the last part of our letter, which include the applicant submitting a complete site plan in compliance with the requirements of Article 6, all outstanding landscaping and natural feature deficiencies being resolved and making sure that they're code compliant, having an additional effort be made to conserve existing tree stands along the northern and eastern sides of the site to the greatest extent that's possible. And then, again, asking that the sidewalk along Fish Lake Road be widened to 8 feet along the full length to enhance compliance with the master plan. Landscaping materials and design, making sure that they comply with the goals and policies of the master plan. And then lastly, the design of the site features, including but not limited to building architecture, lighting, landscaping, all must comply with the regulations of the plan development option as well as other regulations of the zoning ordinance. So again, these are all things that further detail will be provided at the site plan review stage. And having these as conditions in your approval, should you seek to approve, is just reaffirming and making it clear that they are only allowed to, the permit is on the condition that they comply with these. So, and the applicant, I believe, also has a presentation prepared, so I want to give him a chance to do that, and then we could have some discussion.
May I ask a question? So
Sure.
this is basically what we're looking at, a concept plan
Mm-hmm.
for the entire project, Phase 1 and Phase 2?
So this is just, are you referring
The
just?
map that I see here we were provided, it shows Phase 1 to the left and Phase 2 to the right, where it shows the villas on the right, I believe.
Yes.
Duplex villas, yeah.
Yes. And it's just for the convalescent home. This is not part of the other residential that we've
Correct.
previously discussed, Riverside, so.
And could I just ask as well, one of the concerns the audience and I have as well is the amount of parking available. That will still come up in the site plan, is that correct?
It would, yep.
So this is just the general concept of the development, more
Yeah.
or less, and then we'll actually have more detail when we do the site plan.
Yes, so it's
Yeah.
the use, exactly, and.
Which
and
you've already done once, but this is a modification on what we did earlier.
It's an additional, so the previous application that you all looked at and voted to approve is that they are permitted to operate a convalescent home at this site. What they're seeking in here is to also have a second permit as a planned development option. What that's going to allow them to do is have a bit of wiggle room on the setbacks, and that's really the only differentiation from the zoning under this application and under the concept plan that you have.
We're actually giving them exceptions to some of the criteria they have to meet under our normal zoning regulations is what this PUD would actually do.
The setbacks, yes. And and it's specific to that. You know, this is not giving them the ability to go and do whatever they want, right? It's very specific, and that's why we also have those conditions laid out to be as specific as possible. And again, this is all subject to site plan approval, so things like parking would be brought back to this board.
Well, in their letter to us, it talks about the setbacks, and then the setbacks for the parking lot not being achievable, building height not achievable, internal driveway depths from internal streets not achievable. So it is a little bit more than just the setbacks, so I guess I just have some concern about what all is it that we're allowing to go through that are ordinances and things that are governing that they're having issues with.
So the height, my understanding is that was just miscommunication. When this had previously come to the board, there was one round of site plan review that was presented to you. During that phase, there was a miscommunication with height, and I believe we've resolved that. The only thing that this approval would allow is on page 4, we show the required setbacks, and one of the items that you mentioned, it's also a setback, so the internal drive, so it's basically, the distance between the building and an internal driveway. They want to have it closer than is required. The proposed is exactly what they're proposing and what we would be approving or allowing them to do.
I'd like to point out, too, they say it's not attainable. It is, but they'd have to redraw their plans,
Right.
redesign everything.
That was gonna be a
So
question
it's
of mine.
basically, so their concept plans that they probably use other location will fit into the site. So
Right.
not attainable is probably not the right word. It's not easily obtainable.
That was
with their
something
plans, yes.
I
Thought we should
and
bring that
I don't
out,
want to
so
overrule
they
without
could, but-
hearing the presentation, but
Yep.
yes, that was something that struck me was really not much has changed the numerous times we've seen this plan come in front of us, it feels like. I feel like the entryway has changed a little bit, and obviously if they're moving. But if it's too big for the 13.7 acres, like, simply make it smaller to fit the things you need to accommodate. So if you don't want to do that, that's your choice, and that's one thing. But asking us to overrule things just to give the site plan that they want is concerning to me. Because I don't feel that there's been, a lot of retooling here. My personal opinion.
Are these, what they're asking for these differences is basically asking a variance on those areas? Should they not go through, should it not be a different process, or is that something we would do?
Because it's in the overlay district they have
So
that
then
option, I think it's easier.
Easier for
Yeah.
us, but it's still, yes.
And I don't
a
see this
variance
happening,
and-
but if they don't go through with this and we approve it, does it stay available for somebody else that would acquire the property? Or is this specific to Trilogy in their development? And I don't need to know that necessarily right now, but
Yeah.
it is a concern once you approve something, somebody else could come in with something else that may not be, I'm just saying, are we approving it for Trilogy or the land as itself as a PUD?
Special land use runs with the property, but they would have to be building the same exact footprint of a building.
Okay,
So
so
that wouldn't be the
apply
case.
that, okay, all right.
So I'm gonna
Yeah,
give him the
absolutely. Yep.
opportunity to.
Thank you. You have a presentation for us?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, good evening and hello, Holly friends again. I hope everybody had a good Christmas season and a happy New Year. And I have to say it, go blue, go Lions.
Thank you.
And that's been a successful football season for both of those programs this year. So it's good to be back here. So thank you for this opportunity for me to speak. I don't see the site plans that I delivered on this 20th of December in front of you, except they're maybe 11 by 17, so did the 24 by 36s not get delivered is my question.
I have this in the packet.
No, I delivered 24 by 36s, which is a much bigger concept plan that I was hoping to share today, because I wanted to get into detail on what did change. John's trying to get the flash drive up, and I do have that site plan that hopefully we can, discuss on the screen behind you. So, again, I'm Joe Naraki with Trilogy Health Services. I was here in June and September of 2023. It's good to be back here, and again, thanks for the opportunity. For the record, if you go to Google and you type in who owns Trilogy Health Services, we're owned by American Healthcare Real Estate Investment Trust. We're owned by a REIT. We're a real company. We're not a shell company. My paycheck comes from Trilogy Health Services, but every piece of property that we buy, as with any business, you're going to create an LLC. We typically create Trilogy Health, the city name, and an LLC. We're not doing shell games or anything. I just want to clarify that. But Trilogy Health Services, based out of Louisville, Kentucky. I will be at 303 Northwest Bourne tomorrow, when I drive there tomorrow. It's a real place. We're a real company, but we're owned by a REIT, and that's all public knowledge. So easy to do, easy to see who we're owned by. So I wanted to get that on the table, okay? So I have, with this site plan, which I can't present, but I'd like to go through, what I'd like to do is discuss my letter that I addressed to you as a board, and field your questions as these items come across. So I've presented a project that, as our board of directors, as our company, we're very excited to be in, the Township of Holly. We know there's a need. We rely on true analytics, and there's a certificate of need process in the state of Michigan that one must apply for to get bed licenses. They too, the state of Michigan, will tell you that there's a need for assisted living and skilled nursing in this area of the state, in this county. We wouldn't be doing this or spending this kind of money if there wasn't, okay? Regardless of whether the other senior home opened recently, but I would guarantee you that in due time they're going to be pretty darn near capacity too. They're just getting off the ground.
There's a licensing time period where they have to go through for licensing, so that's why there's not many people there.
Correct. Yeah. So
Mission Point went through that when they built in Holly. And they
okay,
had to
good.
go
I'm
through
glad
for
you.
a month or two before they could actually get full, or even ask for.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, you got to get approval at the certificate.
It's normally would not be full for quite a little while.
Correct, and we anticipate the same bit of a challenge, if you will. So, when I was here last in September, that was a site plan that I presented for specifically for us to be able to use that land in our intended use, and that was approved by your planning commission. And again, I thank you. The biggest hurdle coming out of that discussion that night wasn't necessarily the special land use vote. It was what do we do with the life safety concerns and some of the tree concerns and the setback concerns. So what we heard was the North Oakland County Fire Department had a concern on the north side, and so we made those adjustments. We got rid of a whole row of parking along our facility, and as a result of that, we had to find a place to put that parking, and that forced us ultimately to push our building further north. As a result of that, that led to then encroachments of the zoning ordinance. The zoning ordinance is strict when it comes to setbacks. Most areas that, commercial or multifamily or businesses don't have the kind of setbacks that your current zoning ordinance has. And so we saw that as a challenge. So when we started to discuss the possibility of going through multiple variance requests, I don't think I could have sold anybody on that variance process because, yes, could we have potentially bought more property? Potentially, but that's not what we're looking at doing here. We're looking to use the 13.7 acres, which is still larger than our average parcel, but we have an agreement with Buzz for a specific chunk of land, and that's the land I have to live within, and that's the land that's approved by my board of directors, and it's also the piece of property that we feel our facility plus our villas plus the parking lot plus the infrastructure should fit in, because we typically will do that within a 12-acre parcel. So when we entered into an agreement with Buzz, it was for that chunk of land, knowing that he had intended use on the north side for, other residential developers to come in and purchase that. And off to the east, that was a different parcel. And we said, yeah, 13.7 acres, sure, that should work for us. And we entered into an agreement to buy 13.7 acres. Historically, when you go into property, you don't know the ordinance and all of its details. You have a proven track record, like we do, of what works. And 12 acres typically works. Sometimes that can be less. 8 acres, for instance, in Hudsonville, Michigan, 6.5 acres in Muskegon, or it can be more. 13 to 14 acres because of perhaps there's, wetlands that you can't build in and around. So you have to balance it out. But we knew that we were not going to get into a site that was going to be, a major wetland issue. We knew that 13.7 acres would work for our prototype, and I want to reiterate the word prototype, because that's what we're looking to build, not a custom one-off. We just can't do a custom one-off, reduce the facility down from 60,000 square feet to 45,000 to fit on 13.7 acres, because my board of directors will say, no deal, they just won't. I know that they'll not approve a custom or a one-off. They want us to go in and find properties that our prototype works on, and our single-story prototype works on this site. The villas, the same thing. They'll say the same thing about the size, the one-bedroom, the two-bedroom. What works, how many can you get on the property? And then here comes the challenges of the 100-foot setback or the 70-foot setback or the driveways, the length of the driveways of the villas. All of these things started to cascade down a little bit after the September hearing. So we took a back seat to maybe not going through the variance process, because I had to prove 100% all of those challenges, and I couldn't. So the planned development option is a great option for us to be able to come in and ask for flexibility against the strict law of the zoning ordinance. And the planned development option is offered in multiple townships, cities, villages throughout the state of Michigan. And so when McKenna team had said that's an option for you versus a variance, we chose that option. And I'm here, to seek your approval on this planned development option based upon, the application and the details that I put in the letter to the board dated December 20th. And this ties back into the plan that I submitted also on the 20th, okay? So looking at the planned development angle, the challenges of the setback to the convalescent home, the setbacks in between units, the villas and the units themselves, the setbacks, required of the clubhouse to the villas. I'm asking for a planned development approval over all 13.7 acres, but what was initially brought up was setbacks by McKenna in their past letters for the building, parking, but I'm also here to ask for, relief from the strict law of landscaping ordinance. And I've mentioned that in past hearings, that I cannot achieve, retaining all of the trees that, would like to be retained. I've been very transparent about what takes place in development. How do you get to a point where you lay out a building, you establish a finished floor, you have limits of disturbance that you must mass grade for balancing a site out. As I sit here today and I was listening to some of the comments with regards to landscaping, I have to throw it on the table. I cannot meet your zoning ordinance for retaining the trees. I just can't. And it's not that I don't want to, I can't. It makes the project really architecturally, layout, civil-wise, not achievable, and I showed that to you in the cut-fill analysis in September. I brought that red heat map, if you will, of what we have to do in phase 1 and ultimately in phase 2. So let me stay on the landscaping piece a minute, and then we'll get into the other discussion pieces, if you will. So on one end, as I looked at this piece of property a year ago, and it's been about a year plus, and driving up and down Fish Lake, there's a couple things about this piece of property that are unique. It's got some very nice contour. We are able to take that contour and balance that out, and we're able to come up with an elevation, a finished floor elevation that complements the road entrance. We have trees along Fish Lake Road that exist. On one hand, I'm being told you have to try to retain as many trees as possible. I have some of those on the west side. Could I retain some of those? You bet, absolutely. But Consumers Energy owns that easement along Fish Lake Road. They own a 50-foot piece of property right across the front of my property. I can't touch anything inside of Consumers Energy's easement. They're certainly not going to let me go in and, build any building within it. However, I have to now put a walking path outside of that easement, and in order to do that, you have to cut trees. You have to remove trees to do an 8-foot wide bike path. So on one hand, I'm being told, try to preserve as much as you can, but when you can't, you have a landscape ordinance that tells you, the planting replacements. And I'll commit to that, and I've said that before, I can commit to the replanting piece. I can't commit to Joe, Trilogy Health, whoever you hire, protect all of these these trees throughout 13.7 acres. We have seen your heat map. We know that in development there's mass grading. You have to balance out a site. But if your priority number one is that I can't do that, I have to save trees in order to do, I just cannot do that. It's not that I'm unwilling to do it. If there's some mature 8, 10, 12-inch round trees off on the north side between Buzz's property and that future development of the houses, I've got, in this particular layout, is probably a 30 to 40-foot area that we could potentially retain some of those trees on the north side. On the west side, I have to get stormwater from the north, and it's a 10-foot fall from the north to the south of this property. And on one hand, I've got a government agency known as your Drain Commission, but I've got a planning commission saying save the trees. That provides really no solution. Who do I listen to? So on the west side, as I look at my plan here, and I wish it was up here, I could show you what I'm talking about. But between the Consumers Energy easement and the storm drainage, there will be some trees, yes. Can I retain some of those? Highly likely, you bet, when we get into the further details. But if I'm told moving forward, Joe, you've got to retain a lot of those trees. You really have to figure out how to move your villas around, and you probably should reconsider the size of your village center, your villas. Then I can't do that. Then my board of directors will say, Joe, good job. Thanks for going up there. Thanks for going to Howie and asking for approval on our prototype and our villas. But if they're not willing to help you and help your ordinance is one piece, but as a developer, I've mentioned this in the past, mutually beneficial discussions and mutually. So the word I saw in the recommendation, I'm concerned with. And bear with me. On the very last page, on page 6, there's two things. There's item 2 and there's item 4. All outstanding landscaping and natural feature deficiencies must be resolved to be code compliant. And as I've mentioned, I can't be code compliant. I can't meet your ordinance, if that's what that means. Number 5, landscaping materials and design must comply with the goals and the policies of the master plan. I can do that when it comes to master planning new landscaping, but I cannot be code compliant when it says outstanding landscaping and natural feature deficiencies must be resolved to be code compliant. So those are my comments with regards to the landscaping piece. I just wanted to get that on the table right off the bat. Further, I'm asking for approval of both phases, not just phase 1 or phase 2. So whatever decisions are made moving forward, it would carry over to the villas that would be built within that 60-month period, as I previously had committed to. A development agreement would cover that language, okay, that time frame. So when I looked at what is the basis for the plan development, bear with me a minute here. And again, I wish I could refer back to the plan, because when I was writing my reply to you, I had the plan in front of me, okay? But I'd like to go through it and trigger any questions you might have. But before I do that, there was a question. Mike, you had asked for a response from me at the previous meeting with regards to the events, the events that we host, correct?
Yeah, parking. How does the parking flow?
Yeah.
How is your,
Well,
what's
the
your
events,
transfer
yeah.
between shifts?
Yeah, so
How many
that,
people on site? How many cars on site? What
Sure.
does it look like?
well, first of all, you wanted to know the events that we have, the 4 to 6 times a year, the major amount of parking you were concerned with. Okay. I sent that to Karen. Karen, did that ever make its way to Mike? I sent that within the week after that hearing. Can you answer? Because I don't correspond. Oh, okay, so I did reply to that. I did reply in an email. I gave you the events that we would host there. I followed up on that action item, but I know I sent it to you, and perhaps Nani has it also, but just to answer your action item question, if you are still seeking that, it's in an email format within Karen's email. So, grant of the plan development option will result in one of the following: a recognizable and material benefit, et cetera, and so forth. So this is page number 2, if you will. Long-term protection and preservation of natural resources, et cetera. Those are the points that I had to reply to. So, again, this is in my 8.5 by 11 reply to you guys on the 20th. And I say a special land use at the Planning Commission was granted in September. Without this plan development option, however, we simply would have to walk away from the site due to the very stringent setbacks, as I just presented, or forcing us out of our prototype facility, as I just presented, and our villas. The property that we're buying from north to south in dimension does not allow us to construct our prototype senior living center, nor the villas due to the multiple zoning ordinance restrictions. Without the ability to construct our prototype building and villas, our board of directors would not approve this purchase. That said, there's truly a mutually benefit to both Trilogy as the end user and to the community in this approved special land use request. B, as for the long-term protection and the preservation, we are committed to abide by the zoning ordinance when it comes to landscape plantings and preserving what we can of the natural resources. As explained at the special land use hearing, we must mass grade, and as a result, many trees will be unable to be salvaged, but we are committed to replanting, and an extensive landscape irrigation budget is planned for. We have a tree survey completed, and where trees can be salvaged, we're committed to do so. Any questions on my reply there? And if not, I can move on to the second item. The proposed type and density of the use shall not result in an unreasonable increase in or burden of public services. Whether we pursue multiple variances on this PD path or our demand for public services would remain the same. Therefore, no additional burden upon the township. The seller has a responsibility to extend the wet water and sewer utilities to our site, which such utilities are available by the Village of Holly and not the township. Further, we are planning all private driveway and routes to the public fish lake at our own expense, meaning we will manage and we will maintain our own parking lots and our walkways at no cost burden to the township. Any questions on number 2?
Did you mention the sidewalk issue? So I'm just wondering, are you coordinating anything with Sylvan Properties? Because I assume you're only going to put sidewalks in the frontage that you have control over.
Yeah, so that's, yeah, so
because it's not going to go very far, let's put it that way.
It's the sidewalk that will lead to nowhere, or the bike path that will come to an abrupt end. So across the frontage, this came up about 3 to 4 weeks ago, where there was a request to put sidewalk across the frontage. I get it. When the development, we're in first, whoever wants to build south of us or north of us, that bike path, you know. Initially, I thought it was just a sidewalk, but in the last couple of days, it became larger. Might as well throw that on the table. Is it a bike path then, not a sidewalk? Is it the intent to be walking and biking? Yes. Okay, can I have a hot mixed asphalt specification versus concrete?
We'll back you on that.
Okay, because that's historically what we've done. Hot mixed asphalt is 8 foot wide. Historically, that's acceptable versus concrete. Concrete's going to move, crack, et cetera, and so forth. Hot mixed asphalt, like a parking lot, will have a state specification to it.
We'll get back to you on that as part of the site plan review process, okay? This is one step in the process. They have to do the final site plan if they get access.
Did we all have an opportunity to read Joe's letter? Not that I'm trying to, but
Well, I
2
hope so.
pages of reading, and we're 2 hours into the meeting. Just did everyone have the opportunity to read it previously and have any questions for him in his letter?
I did one, I mean, in
Yeah.
reading your letter, when you go to, let's see, the page where you said your project, our project is phased into 2 phases,
Yes.
and there could be part of an agreement, the phase 2 will be completed within 60 months of the project approval. So that's why I asked, is this conceptual that we have before us for phase 1 and phase 2? When the site plan is presented, is phase 2 going to be part of it? Because
Yes.
I would think
Yes.
that certainly would, to take away from that 60 months, if it.
Well, the
it's not
60-month is a
part of it,
time frame that I committed to that would become part of the development agreement. I want Phase 1 and Phase 2 to be, heard by your committee and ultimately approved by the Township Board, but that 60-month commitment, as I mentioned in September, is for the Phase 2 piece to be constructed or built out by.
I just, oh, go ahead.
No, that's okay. Did I answer your question, though?
No, the way I kind of read it, I thought, so then are we just looking at the 1, and then you've got to bring back
No, I don't want to.
phase 2, and then there we are, so it's all going to be one. Okay,
That's all
so
one,
that's
yes,
my
correct.
question.
Under the 13.7 acres, correct. Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
And obviously, you've told us the 60 months, but what do we have a guarantee in that? What happens if you don't do that?
So you'll have a development, I'm assuming you'll have legal counsel in ensuing months. Your legal counsel will draft a development agreement, okay? So that will probably have some type of monetary tied back into that.
Okay.
But also, it's a legal binding document, so.
And I think we discussed it slightly back in September, but how is this second phase going to look in that 5-year period before it's actually fully completed?
Well.
I assume that you don't want it to look awful, or people aren't going to go to the.
No, and again, if I had, no luck on the site plan at all? Okay. So, if we were to walk halfway up that site from Fish Lake, and we were join hands and we were going to walk, 550 feet into the property straight east, we're going to be at a hill, and you're going to see some shrubs, but the vast majority of the large-scale trees are back towards the back side of that property. I'm kind of envisioning that's what that second phase will still look like, minus the work that we have to do to extend the sanitary and water, and a little bit of the grading that has to do with the parking lot on the east side of our villa. So in the site plan that I had submitted, hopefully you can see it, but I had my engineer mark up phase 1 and phase 2 pretty large. Mm-hmm. So the phase 1 is actually going to encompass a double back parking area right up to our phase 2 clubhouse. So if you look at the clubhouse, you look at the villas, in phase 1, we're going to have the parking lot 100% completed for the village center, while the balance of phase 2 is going to be the extension of the private drive plus the driveways to the villas. So when you look at the summary of parking spaces, your ordinance requires me to put in, for the village center in phase 1, it requires me to put in 59 stalls, and I'm going to do 92 stalls. So I'm going to exceed your zoning ordinance quite a bit there, and that's because we want more parking for the village center, phase 1. The phase 2 will match up with ordinance. You've got 59 stalls required, and we're going to do 56. So when it's all said and done, your ordinance is telling me I have to put 118 stalls in phase 1 and phase 2, but we're going to do 148. That's what this plan represents. So the initial commitment in phase 1 would be those 92 stalls go in, and then beyond that, it's going to be pretty rustic still. It'll be a field. There should not be any mass grading going on from the middle of the property to the south, but there will be some grading that has to go on the north of that to get the water and the sanitary sewer to our site. Hopefully that makes sense. Where we're going to run the water and we're going to run the sewer is going to be in the future road of phase 2, the northernmost road. The road, the private driveway that would be servicing the north side villas run the sanitary and the water in that general vicinity, so that shut-off valves, et cetera, to each unit, that water line will already be in place. That's going to be required by the village to meet the ordinance, so we're not going to just stack the water lines and the sanitary sewer on the very north. So as I mentioned 10 minutes ago, there's room for us to salvage some of the trees on the north side if they exist, because we're not going to run the sanitary and the water so tight to the north boundary. We're going to bring it down so that in the future, in Phase 2, it's in the right location, but built during Phase 1. Water and sewer through Phase 2 to service Phase 1 will be installed in Phase 1. Does that make sense? We have to get the water from the very northeast and over to our village center. Okay. So, again, going back to the site plan and then my presentation or my follow-up, then led to some comments back from McKenna. So, site plan was submitted, my 4 pages of my comments on why I believe your approval is validated is my 4 pages here. And if you have any questions on that, I mean, I can answer any of those. But I also have a couple of other comments with regards to the McKenna response. So, and respectfully, I appreciate your comments with regards to the setback, Alexis, but I think one of the things that was missing was the plantings, the landscaping, et cetera, and so forth. So, as we move forward and I seek your approval for a plan development, I'm bringing up a development with regards to the facility and its operation and future villas. Again, reiterating, we're going to operate those, okay? We're not the company that's going to just come in and build this and not operate it. And I've mentioned that in June, I mentioned it in September, I want to mention it again in January. We are developers and operators, okay? So there might be some white noise that you hear about Trilogy Health. Yes, we're owned by a REIT, okay? But the REIT's strongest arm is Trilogy Health Services. They own, this particular REIT owns healthcare facilities worldwide. We're their strongest senior holding, and we're proud of that. And we are committed to this area, and it will most likely be called Trilogy Health Services Holly LLC. And, that's who has the contract, and that's a legitimate limited liability company. It's just that Trilogy Health Services is going to be the operator.
Perhaps I'm wrong, but when I searched for Trilogy, all the homes had different names.
They do. They're listed typically by the city that they're in.
Really, Trilogy was the ultimate owner, but it really didn't show that in their name. In fact, I don't remember seeing a name called Trilogy.
Oh, yeah. So
I could be wrong on that. That was a while ago. I looked those
up. So you can, they'll historically will be the city listed with Trilogy in the initial name, correct? Yep. I can provide you a whole list of all the LLCs for all of our entities if need be, okay?
I thought you had one in Grand Blanc. I thought was the Oaks, I thought. So, again.
Well, that one could be the Oaks of.
And I know your company also bought other ones of your entities. So some of them that started out as different names, you probably continued to name. But
yeah. And again, I just want to turn that white noise off. If you want to have a listing of all our LLCs that is owned by our REIT and Trilogy Health, more than happy to do that. So, okay. I'm happy to do that.
Could I kind of comment? I think I want to have McKenna's response. Is you're asking kind of for us to avoid the tree ordinance. I've never been a supporter of it. I think it was unnecessary. To get quality development, you have to take trees out. And it can be redone very well. You can plant new trees, they grow back, and you can plant appropriate trees, where some of the trees that are there aren't ones you necessarily would want in a development. So I have sympathy for that, but I'm not sure how can we allow this, because this is a major selling point. Not that I'm trying to promote as development, but I think anybody developing is going to have the same issue in Holly Township. We allowed Shannon development that started before I was in the planning commission, but everybody applauded how nice it was, and they planted trees and everything, but they had to have taken a bunch of trees out. They might not have been nice trees, but they had to, and yet we like the end result. So again, I want to point out, just because we have to take trees out doesn't mean it won't be a good development. And sometimes if we try and leave trees, it leads just to a slow, painful death for that tree. When you try and raise levels of ground around them or do excavating around the roots, you damage enough and they just die, and they look awful, or potentially they do for years as they die. So, so how can we allow this without a problem, I guess is the question.
Well, that's why the ordinance anticipates that. So the ordinance says if you take out a protected tree, you got to replace it. That's all. And I'm sure he's willing to replace all the trees that he's gonna take off. And it doesn't have to be. One of the beautiful things here is, yeah, they really forced you to focus on 13 acres, right? But they're part of a larger development. And I've tried to stress that from the beginning. So there's no reason why they can't put trees on the rest of the Riverside property in order to meet the ordinance requirements. There's no way, you know, with all the property that we're talking about here, that there's not a solution to this. I mean, it's crazy that we're even talking for, I don't know, half an hour about the trees. And you can solve this. I know you guys can do it. I mean, look at all the success you've had. You had to run into this before. So I know you can solve this problem without asking them to give you relief from the tree ordinance. Right?
No, I've mentioned in the past, we'll meet your zoning ordinance when it comes to tree plantings.
Replacements.
Replacements, correct.
Not new, not the landscape requirements that come as part of the development also.
Okay, highlighted on answer number 2.
Replacement ratio for the trees that you're taking out. There's a replacement ratio.
That's correct.
You can
So
replace it, so you can do that.
the answer is yes.
So there
But
really
it's the-
shouldn't be a problem with the tree issue.
Yeah.
Right. Wasn't there some other type of height zone ordinance or some height ordinance that was being, they resolved that?
That was
Okay, I heard that mentioned.
that was a elevation. We have a cupola at the very top of our elevations, and we exceeded that according to the ordinance. I'm glad it's resolved.
Oh, okay, all right.
I didn't know it was resolved, but thank you, whoever resolved it. But all we were looking for was, we want to still build that cupola. It's all glass, it lets in natural light, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
But it exceeded your zoning ordinance, so.
Oh, all right.
So that's another piece I was seeking.
So my other question, and I don't know the answer, so the zoning or the ordinances for the setbacks, what are the purpose of those? Is it life safety? Is it beautification? Is it a mixture of both, or?
The purpose of the
I like the setbacks, so like like this, the first one, they're within 9 feet. The other, this 100-foot setback, they're within 12 feet. The 50-foot setback, they're within 23 feet. That's the worst one. And then the 70-foot front to front, front to rear, rear to rear, and they're at 86 foot for their plus 16. But, so,
We've identified that with this project, and we should probably address that
yeah.
in the future. But John, you could
Yeah, it's a combination of all those things, right? You're trying to get the proper relationship between the building and the road most of the time, or between two buildings next to each other. It's not till they get really close together that you're really talking about life safety issues. But usually it's to make sure there's enough space in front of the buildings to provide a sidewalk that people are comfortable walking on, before you get to the street. So to put all those things that you normally find in front of a building, you need a setback of a certain distance. So,
Right.
And I think our conclusion is the setback relief that they're asking for is not unreasonable. But two things. One, in order to even consider it, they have to provide some benefit, and we talked about that at length, to offset it.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things I saw in Extreme, it was in Macomb County, I visited a small farm there that was in the middle of development. They allowed the houses, and I don't think it was more than 10 feet from the property line. The farmer had to go and put a fence up to keep those people from leaving their backyards and into their property. So I think part of it's just a buffer area, so you actually have a little bit of sight, and just so there's a little bit of area that you can get to without having to trespass on the neighboring properties.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I look at this, the main concern I have is for Mr. Joseph Berry's property being right on that drainage area, and then if he goes to the corner of his property, he can see whoever's parked going to work there, the parking lot. That seems extremely close.
Joseph Berry.
Yeah.
May I
And then-
address that?
Sure.
Okay. So I've had a couple calls with Mr. Berry. I know he's not here tonight. So I had introduction to him in September, when he was at the meeting here, and I called him within the week after. And if you talk to him, he'll testify to this. We had a Teams call. I introduced myself, told him our willingness to work with a couple issues there. So number one is when he bought the property, I think it was in maybe middle of summer this past year in 2023, he had said that there was a concern with regards to the septic, maybe going and encroaching the property on the south, his south. There's also chain link fence that's off of his property on the proposed property we're purchasing, and there's a large-scale tree in that very southeast corner of his property. So in conversation with him, I asked if he could get a verification of the septic drain field, and he did. And he's safe, he's fine, it's on his property. The chain link fence, as established by our survey, is off his property and on ours, and I said our intent is to keep it there, not to take it out. We made a commitment to do a 6-foot, 72-inch high fence months ago around that property, which we're going to do. The large-scale tree, I'll call it a 48-inch round trunk. I never want to get rid of, Mother Nature's big tree like that, so I said we'll fence around it. It's right on the corner of the property. So what we're doing here is we're not going to cut that swale to expose that root. We're going to put a pipe in. So in our civil engineering drawings, we'll cut a swale on the south side of his property, but then our intent is to pick up the stormwater with a buried culvert pipe, 18-inch for conversation. So we don't expose the roots of his tree, and picks up that water then from the high point, which is at the north of our property. So the intent is to make sure that stormwater that currently floods his backyard, because it's high by 10 feet from that point down to the south end. His land in that area is pretty flat. I mean, our survey, our elevations show that. But there's a willingness on our part to get that stormwater around his property without taking that tree out, without exposing its roots, to your point earlier. And then also that hopefully then drains his yard properly back towards our swale, and that should resolve that issue. So does that answer your question that you were thinking?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
I just think it's close. I mean, just looking at it,
Sure.
for what he's, if he's in his backyard doing things, he's going to look at a parking lot, which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's part
I
of
see
the
what you're
reason I
saying.
believe
Yeah.
for the setbacks is to protect the neighboring properties from seeing anything or whatnot, having that buffer. And then, the other concern I guess I have, McKenna gave a recommendation with these few things, and then, just, he doesn't want us to include line number 2. Line number 3, additional effort must be made. That to me is subjective, because anyone could say that they made the effort. But if we just can't, we can't, such as we just can't do this ordinance as it's laid out. So I'm asking for forgiveness on that, and then asking to not have line number 5. So I do still have some concerns, but that's just my opinion.
My concerns are still parking issues. I don't think they have enough parking, but that will be dealt with a site plan. But the problem is I'm not sure where they have space to put much more parking into their existing. But I think 91 spaces for 91 residents plus employees.
Right.
I've been to these facilities several times when there was holidays or whatever.
That's
and
nuts.
they have
Yeah.
family. Not everybody does, but it could be multiple people to visit one resident.
I just don't know where they're gonna
I
go.
think parking is very minimal here. And I'm not saying they have, and I don't know what the alternatives are, a paid parking lot for everything, but they should have something alternative. And I thought Hollow Township was actually encouraging, not necessarily paved, but additional space available for parking. And I don't know what alternatives they have in Holly Township. I just worry about the space possibly that's what's left there, but.
But the space is never going to get better, right?
Yes, and that's the problem why it has to be dealt with now.
So is it going to be, well, the setbacks we had planned on keeping, we have to get rid of, and that's just the way it has to be, because now we need to meet the parking you want.
In some places, you have these facilities, they're near a main road you can park along or something. That's not going to be
Not
true
gonna
here
happen.
at all. So to me, the parking has to be dealt with in the site they have and has to be dealt with before the development gets started, because it's not something that's going to be easily added later. For the same thing, you'd be into more setback issues and. So anyway, that's a concern I have, but I think at this point, I think you're getting the point of approving their suggestions without number 2, 3, and 5, correct? That was what you were.
Well, I had concerns that
I don't
if,
think we should take out any of the recommendations.
yeah, that's, that,
Well, the recommendations based, those are the binding facts. I think it's just under conditions, what exactly conditions do we want to put in here?
and that's
think
what
we
I think
follow
we
the
have to
advice of
discuss,
McKenna.
because we
Is
may
these
disagree or what we
conditions-
have to get squared away.
I mean, the facts at the top are basically, they are facts, they were there, they meet whatever the criteria, but it's the conditions.
And I may be the outlier, but I'm of the opinion, I mean, if we don't like the ordinance, a future meeting can be that we need to change it and address it, but the ordinance is there now, and that's what we have to work with, just like if we're having discussion around the size and space of dwellings per acre on the current master plan that we are locked into, and that's what's in there, and that's what we have to work with. That's the ordinance and what it is. If we want to change it, that's a different conversation for a different meeting. But that's my personal opinion.
And I could be, tell me if I'm wrong. Overall, I don't think we're opposed to this development.
Correct,
Just the
100%.
conditions.
Any
is what we're dealing with.
development type of development, could be a bowling alley, could be a movie theater, whatever, I would have same response. If you're handing me a site plan that overrides these ordinances that are what govern the up north of Oakland County, I would have the same response.
But I don't think, so I agree with Glenn with the tree issue, and I also agree with McKenna with the replacement issue. I don't think that ordinance is super duper onerous. I think it's designed to do some type of preservation of trees, and there are some that it could be. There's a couple important trees here. We have one of the largest oak trees in Oakland County right over there, but this is, I don't think it's going to be a.
If we want development, sometimes we have to give
Yeah,
them
just-
some of these things.
And I get that, but then
And
if
it's
we're
a
gonna
quality
talk about
development, which
replanting,
hoping this is,
but replanting north, north, that's all gonna be developed too, whereas,
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know
surprised they
where
were
we're gonna put
suggesting
13
putting a
acres
similar
of-
property,
yeah.
because then they'll be taken out for
It's
their
all gonna be-
development,
yeah,
so
so
I
it-
don't think that's an answer to the question.
Yeah.
is putting
Well,
a
they're part
similar
of the
property.
whole, this is part of the whole development thing.
Well, no, this is by itself pretty much. Suburban properties is a whole nother issue.
Right.
What's left.
Yes, it is.
yeah, they're doing some things to connect them to make it seamless,
Yeah.
but this is, and so I don't,
Trees can be resolved and dealt with.
I
yes.
don't see
Yeah.
trees.
Yeah.
It really, the setback doesn't bother me too much, really. I
They're
think
not
okay.
super out of range. If
Yeah,
you do
I
the
don't
math,
see the
it's not-
setback is really a big problem. The only problem, we'd want to verify that if we agreed to these setbacks, it's kind of the footprint we got here, and there, go back to the fire department man, that once we agreed to this, we'd want to be sure that he was okay with the fact of, hey, he can get his fire truck down between his buildings to put a fire out behind him and stuff, but I don't know what he needs for all that. I mean, we'd have to, when we got to the site plan stuff, that's where we talk about the water main size and all that stuff. That's not here, but we'd be kind of stuck into these setbacks if, did the fire department review this yet?
Part of the.
You have to go up there.
yeah, can you?
Come on.
I'm sorry. And I know, I
We
keep
let
pushing
Mr.
you all the
Mr.
time.
But before I go on, I need to make a disclaimer here. Years ago, I purchased shares in Griffin American Healthcare, which then merged with Griffin American Healthcare 4, which went public and owns this operation. So that's why I generally, on this project, I've had Matt do all of the writing and the communication, just so that there isn't any perceived conflict.
You're all right.
All right,
I don't
thank you.
think-
One of the reasons for the setback variance request is there was parking along the north side of the
Correct.
building. And that's where all of the high hazard areas were, the utilities. And we asked that that bank of parking be relocated somewhere else. Already they're short on space for parking, they moved it, and to accommodate it, then they had to change setbacks. Is that?
No, your statement with regards to short on parking is inaccurate, sir.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what they're.
Well, he's saying it meets the ordinance, is what you're saying.
It far exceeds it by 33 spaces.
We might need to revisit the ordinance.
No.
But that's not something we can do at this point.
I'm not saying they're short on parking.
Correct.
Yeah.
Your conversation, you felt there was less parking. They moved parking for the fire department so that we have better access to the building. And they also addressed the street widths as it went through. So we were satisfied with this portion of it. We reserve the right on the next site plan where we talk about water mains and supplying the correct amount of water to the building and the sprinkler system.
So the setbacks don't cause you any problem?
So we're looking at these setbacks here.
Problems is what they wanted to happen.
It forced them to expand things out a little bit.
All right.
So can we lock it in that the setbacks, like we can't, they don't change from what's being offered here to approve it? So that we don't get into this and then it's, oh, I need all this additional space that was setbacks?
Well, I'm assuming if we agreed to this for a special land use, this proposed setbacks would be what we would be, yes.
That's what I want to make sure. Yeah.
It could not, if it changed again, we would have to go through this whole process again, and we don't want to do that if we did. We want this process to be one time only, right? Second time around.
So this is what, if you're looking at these setbacks and you're looking at side front where the minimum required is 50, but they're proposing 27. Distance between clubhouse and nearest side of townhouses.
So that's just that clubhouse is 27 feet between there and the townhouses.
So you're talking 23 feet difference. Does that agree with, and that agrees with?
You can refer to the date of this letter, the McKenna letter. You can refer to it in your approval and the recommendations that are inside of the letter so that it all applies.
To all 6, if that's what we want.
Yeah.
Okay. But that, I think we have to figure out.
I think we should do that. I don't think we should go.
Yeah.
I think they got really good recommendations. That's what we should do.
Any additional thoughts? Would someone like to make a motion?
It sounds going to be very long.
It is going to be long, yep, probably.
Well, no, she gave you an out. She just said just refer to the letter.
Yeah, you can just, I believe you can, it would have to be to approve it contingent upon the six recommended.
This recommendation right here.
Just read that, yeah, read the
Approve
recommendation,
special
there you
land use
go.
request for the plan development.
There you go.
If I could, really quickly.
Oh, hold on.
I just have one last note, sorry.
We're ready.
I noticed in our letter, so the concept plan that you have, it was originally dated August 14th, so that's what you're looking at right now. There is a revision date on that from December 20th of 2023. So when you go to make a motion, rather than saying August 14th, just so that we're all clear, it should be December 20th. That's when the revisions were made. So I just wanted to note that. And to the question about if you approve this permit tonight, if they will be able to change and go even further in going beyond the minimum setbacks, that's not, they're not able to do that. It's
We're
specific
approving the
to
setbacks
this.
that has been laid out
On this
in this
letter.
letter.
Exactly, yep.
All right, that's good.
And the conditions, that would be, can be addressed and clarified more when the site plan is presented, or conditions we would put on these here.
So,
Hold on.
Well, yeah.
Wait.
are you asking about the conditions that are laid out here? So the ones that refer to site plan review, yes, there are additional details that, like we've talked about, need to be clarified and will be clarified
this-
during site plan review. But these conditions are specific to this special land use permit, the 6 that are laid out.
Yes.
So the date of 12/2023, though, that still applies to this thing we're looking at right now. It has a standard required and what the proposed is.
Yes.
Nothing's changing on that, even though it's a different date than what this says.
Yeah, 'cause it says.
Exactly.
the
That
August
was
is what
just,
she's
Right, I just want to be sure that I don't have something that says 12/2023 on it.
So the,
it's
the
the same.
plan,
Okay.
the plans that you have,
Sure,
go ahead.
there's a date table in the corner. The original drafting of the plans was from August 14th. They made revisions on December 20th.
Okay.
So that's why we want to make sure that we've got that date. The most recent version of the plans is what you're looking at and what you're approving the special land use under. Does that make sense?
It
So-
does.
It does.
As long as there's nothing different, and if you say it, then
Yep.
we're all good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go
Any
for it,
other
Glenn.
questions?
I will attempt this, but so I move that we approve the plan development and the recommendations by McKenna Associates dated 12/23/23, including the setbacks. Do we need to go any further into detail?
You'd have to say
You gotta say
special
the-
land
Yep,
use.
yep.
Special land use for the
sorry.
plan development.
So
And
I
what the
think, I
parcel-
think the recommendation is just their recommendation. I don't know if it is a worded motion for us.
Well,
So you may
we're doing the
have to.
special land use, so we want to, that would be that.
Right.
I think the recommendations were based on their finding of facts, and they're recommending, based on that, it would be to clarify that with the site plan, they must comply with the 6 conditions in the letter.
That they still have to come
And
back
any-
and.
Correct, yeah. So I think it needs to be worded as such, possibly that, we're approving the special land use application from Trilogy Health Services, like
Could we
basically
refer to page
reading the new
6?
business and then contingent upon the findings and 6 recommendations from the McKenna letter dated 12/20/2023.
On page 6, we could even reference that.
Something like that.
And if we want to put in there
Setback
too, the
and-
parcels 01/28/101/014 and parcels 01/28/101/013.
Yeah, so whoever
Just to
makes
make
it,
sure
I think,
specific.
whoever makes it, I believe, has to read the number 1 in its entirety on new business, and then the things we're asking.
Well, she's writing it down there. Is that everything Glenn said?
The other recommendations too, there's 4 and then there's 6.
Yeah, there's recommendations, he has 2 sets of them.
Recommendations, special land use approval based on the McKenna letter dated January 16th, 2024, and all the recommendations.
Could we just say 1 through 4 and 1 through 6?
Yes.
Yep.
So that would cover all of those? And somebody wanted me to read all the special, just like application from Trilogy Health Services, 303 North Hurstbourne Parkway, Suite 200, Louisville, Kentucky, for a planned development that will consist of convalescent home and independent living housing on the parcels 0125, 101, 013, and 0125, 101, 014 in a RM-1 multiple family residential district.
Contingent.
Contingent on page 6, recommendations 1 through 4 and 1 through 6.
From the letter.
From the letter dated 12/23/23 from McKenna.
12/20.
23.
Oh.
You're close.
Yeah,
Oh,
12/20 of
12/20.
2023.
Okay.
The site plan is 12/20/23, and the McKenna
My
letter
goodness.
dated January 16th
Oh.
of 2024.
I'll second that.
And reviewing the fact that we still have a site plan that will deal with more detail
Yes.
in the future. This is just the basic beginning part.
I know that's a big motion, so whenever we're ready, we'll do a roll call vote. Unless there's any other, discussion.
No, we're good. We'll read it next meeting.
Just keep practicing, you'll get it right.
It's on YouTube.
Curtin, you second?
I second it, that's correct.
Okay, roll call. Mason,
Yes.
Curtin,
Yes.
Mattson,
Yes.
Mitchell,
Yes.
McCann,
Yes.
Fletcher.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Motion passes. All right. Number 2, 2023 Annual Planning Commission Report.
Okay. So, in your packets is the 2023 report, which it's a state law required, it's a state law requirement that a planning commission shall submit a report of all their activities for the year. So that's really all that it is. It's a summary of the applications that you've looked at. The only thing of note that I wanted to bring up is that at the end, we mentioned, looking ahead into 2024, and there have been allusions during this meeting to looking at the zoning ordinance. So back in 2021, there was a zoning ordinance diagnostic conducted. There are a lot of items in there that recommended updates, and, that's something that would need to be authorized by the township board. It's not something that you can just vote and say, hey, let's go do it right now. But it's something that we have ready to go, and that looking into this year that we could have on the docket. So if you approve this report, it'll go to the township board, sort of just as a filing item. And the last thing I wanted to note on this is about trainings. So on the last page, we listed just a couple links on some trainings that the state and Oakland County offer for planning commissioners. You guys have a really challenging job, and it's really complicated stuff. So when we work with planning commissions, we often do training plans. With Holly, we don't have anything as in-depth as that, like a work plan for this report, but if you are interested in trainings, please let us know. And also there are some that are just at your disposal that you can do on your own time. So, do you have any questions for me?
So Alexis, the report then goes to the board.
Yep.
I think it looks good.
Anyone have any questions?
No, looks great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wouldn't mind some training either. That'd be cool.
Do we have to motion and approve the report for it to be sent in?
I think we do to send it to the township board.
Motion to send it to
Okay.
the township board, yep.
So I'd entertain a motion to approve the 2023 Annual Planning Report as presented.
And send it to the township.
And send it to the township board. I'll entertain a motion.
Sure, I'd support that.
Support?
I wasn't making the motion, but
You
I'll
said
make
you're
the
gonna
motion.
motion it.
So I'll make a motion to approve the
I'm getting
2023
motion
Annual
sickness.
Planning Report as presented. Second by Curtin.
There you go.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? None. So
I
moved.
just didn't think I should make every motion.
I think it's all sounds like a great idea.
All right, new business number 3, election of officers, chair, vice chair, secretary.
You're all reelected.
If we need a recommendation or motion, I will recommend Ryan Mattson to be the planning commission chair.
I will second that.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
So you run his own
None.
election.
There you go,
That's a
yep.
good thing.
Budget is 0. Good.
I'd make a motion to keep Glenn Mitchell as vice chair.
Do you accept that?
Second motion.
As long as they don't have to do anything, that's fine,
Okay.
yeah.
I second that. All in favor?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Very good.
None. And I'd make a motion to keep the secretary as Mr. Curtin.
I'll second that motion.
All right.
I think we
Sec-
already did this. I already reelected them all. It's-
You tried?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
So you
opposed?
didn't object?
No.
I'm good.
All right.
Sorry, you didn't get second.
I didn't
Mr.
think
McCanny,
that.
second.
Where's the party at after your
Right,
winning
yeah.
election?
Yeah, exactly.
The winning election party.
All right,
The president
reports.
should pay, though.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We make him host. I like that idea.
We'll do a re-election. Reports, anyone have anything to report?
I'd like to report that the reports person is not here.
All right, so that brings us to our last public comment of the evening. So this is another opportunity for the public to address the commission. You'll have 3 minutes. If so voted, we can approve you for an additional 3 minutes. Please state your name and address prior to speaking. Yes, sir.
Mark Cornwell, 12415 North Holly Road. Actually, for 12 years, I had the privilege to sit in your chair as a planning commissioner for Holly Township, and got to go through 2 new master plans and a lot of contentious developments, the Silverman Pulte development, and I'm glad I'm standing here and not sitting in your seats anymore, because it gets tough when you're trying to pull out for the community and for the people that are going to live there, extract things from the developers that you think will be important to the community. But tonight, I'm here, a couple of other things I'd like to discuss, and I guess first, I want to be clear that my grandfather, he was a World War II vet, and he earned a Bronze Star in the Navy. And my father-in-law are interned in the Great Lakes National Cemetery. But I'm here, I want to ask the question to this commission: have you been afforded an opportunity to look at a site plan for what is probably the largest development that Holly Township has seen other than the village? Have you had a formal presentation from the Veterans Administration about what's going on out there?
No.
No. I've heard the same thing from our board members, too, that they have never had any kind of a formal presentation. Well, one of the things as a planning commissioner that was near and dear to me was water issues, groundwater, stormwater runoff, and things of that nature. And in fact, I did bring to the table, I had been certified by the MDEQ in soil erosion and sedimentation control. And frankly, that got into a lot of detail about what happens with water. And I live adjacent to the cemetery, and I've seen things since this development occurred, and of course, somebody alluded to the fact that land didn't perk, and that's why it was always questionable about its development potential. But I'm seeing what I think is the groundwater levels rising. I can't verify this because unfortunately we don't have any monitoring wells in place to have any determination as to whether groundwater in that region is increasing. But it is something that is of concern to me, and I've been noting that trees around my wetlands are dying. And I surmise, I'm a horticulturist by education, so I do care a lot about trees, and I know a lot about trees. And when you raise a water table, and what you basically do is you drown the trees. When mature trees start dying along a periphery of a wetland, that means they get no oxygen.
I'm sorry, would we entertain an additional 3 minutes for his public comment?
I'm there already? Okay.
Yes, sir.
That goes by fast.
Yep. I'll I'm sorry, it's getting tight, I'm getting late.
Additional 3 minutes.
Yes, an
Mark.
additional 3 minutes.
Yes, I would move that.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? No. None. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
I appreciate that. I'm going to move on from that subject anyway, but I would ask that something be done, that we have a formal presentation from the Veterans Administration about that site development that encompasses 600 acres. And I would propose that there would be groundwater monitoring wells around that facility. Now, second point was master plan, and like I said, I went through a couple of those, and to be honest with you, the last one I went through, I believe John was here, was probably the reason I grew so completely frustrated with all of this. We were in the process of working on a master plan, and we were looking at a town center that had an epicenter around Fish Lake Road and Grange Hall Road, and yet another entity comes into our township and overrides anything and everything we want to do. So consequently, we ended up with an ugly electrical substation right on an incredibly important intersection. That is inexcusable in my opinion, and I don't care what Consumers Power, I don't know what the negotiations were, but there should have been more negotiations about trying to figure out something else to do, and not putting a substation on a very important corner of our property and pretty much blowing our whole master plan out of the water. Why have a master plan if every Tom, Dick, and Harry can roll into town and override you? What's the point? I mean, I applaud what you're trying to do, because I know I tried to do the same thing, tried to get concessions for bike paths and everything else, and to pay attention to not polluting groundwater. And so, at any rate, too, I'm a little dismayed that, well, let me ask the question, is this, all these documents that you're looking at for the master plan, is this online, that I can look at it online? Electronically?
It will be, it's the next step.
Just the old one is available now.
Okay, we live in a modern age, and all this documentation should be available to the citizens online. We should be able to look at it. We should not have to go down to the township office to acquire this information, to be an educated public. We live in a modern age. Okay. Next question, have you been consulted about anything ever about the township hall? About siting of the township hall, or, anything about that? Any township hall business?
So the public comment's not so much a dialogue. So you can ask us questions, and we have answered some, but typically we're not to answer them. I pause your remaining time. So we can take note of that and try to answer them after public comment briefly if we have the answer or whatnot, but just understand we're not trying to be rude.
I understand.
And not answering.
I know my time's up. And I'll be happy to just send my comments email if I have people's emails.
That would be lovely. I'm
Okay.
sure I'll touch base with you after the meeting.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else for public comment? Yes.
Mary Blanchard, 3444 Old Creek Drive. And I, like Mark, would like to applaud you for the good job that you're doing and the looking out for our citizens. Thank you. I also would like to say that on Thursday, February 15th, 2024, we are going to have a meeting at the VFW Hall, 201 Airport Drive in Holly, Michigan, from 6 to 7:30. This will be a public meeting open to anyone. Michigan Department of Health and Human Services will be coming to present on the Eat Safe Fish guide, as well as sharing information on contaminated fish limits for both Bush Lake and Rice Lake. After the MDHHS presentation, members of the Save Falk Road Committee will be discussing our interaction with agencies and politicians concerning all water issues throughout Holly, Michigan. We hope that everybody will come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else for public comment?
Hello, my name is Norm Koski, 2167 Hidden Ridge Drive. I back up to the tree line to the west, looking towards Fish Lake Road. We've had a few discussions about lots being developed, new houses going in, I'm going to call it my backyard. And the only plans that I've seen are all 50 by 130 lots from you guys. And I'm just curious, as we talk about density, that's 6.7 lots per acre. And anybody who's been into our subdivision as it exists right now, we've got 7-foot offsets. It's ridiculous. Everybody's right on top of each other. And the reason why this is really important, not just for me, but this is the nicest part that remains within our area right now. And the plans that we've seen in the past don't take advantage of it. There's a wetlands that's back there. There's ample opportunities to make bigger lots, okay, that's going to benefit Holly, the city of Holly, because they're going to be able to build nicer homes on that. It's going to be less money for the developers. You don't have to put in as much infrastructure. And it's all scoped out at 50-foot lots. And I haven't seen a revised plan potentially for that area, but it's just, anybody who's ever been there would realize how beautiful that area is. And what we spoke about earlier with the Trilogy project is eliminating potentially parts of a tree line. Now, I know I've heard you say that trees can be replaced. This is a 75 to 100 year stand of trees that we're talking about. You can't replace that with a 15-foot maple. Respectfully, I understand that they need some more room. I'm not in a position to disagree with the direction you guys are going to go. I listened very carefully tonight. Seems you're pretty well set on approving their request for setbacks. I would ask that anybody come out and take a look at the area. Karen is the only one I know who's ever actually been there, okay? She's helped me out, visited the area multiple times. She understands pretty much everything I just said. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, anyone else for public comment? All right, hearing none, seeing none, I move to adjourn at 9:24 p.m.
So it's big and like this middle of National Cemetery. The water comes across Holly Road to Mitchell Lake. There's this ditch, which is what really is a problem. It's over the years.
I tried. Thank you.
I trace this along.
Yeah, absolutely.
The water comes this way across here, and it just kind of disappears. It's not like, it looks like it gets smaller. And I don't know where the water, there's all those lakes over there.
It's terrible.
What is it? Yep, that's the one that's here, I think.
And you're still,
It just keeps going on down here, but it's like it disappears. Now, maybe it's just the way they did the map.
I mean, you're still.
No, there's lakes here, so it may drain that. But I just thought it was funny, I kept looking at it, and it doesn't go anywhere.
I just, I got the phone card, I had talked to Daddy about it.
They actually do. They do want to excavate, they put a perimeter down to keep the water from flowing.